All right, so we're about to go live on YouTube. I'll figure out Facebook after and see if it works. So I believe we are live officially on YouTube. Hello, everybody. We're still trying to get things set up here. We're working out our streaming angles here. It looks like it's not going to stream on Facebook. It looks like it's just going to stream on YouTube, but that's okay. More people can go there than anything else at this point. So I'm going to close that. It looks like we're streaming, and say hello to everybody who's joining us on YouTube. Um, this is the first time that we've ever done this. My name is Anthony Marco. I'm the president of the Hamilton District Labor Council. This is definitely the first time that we have ever done this, and it is what we are calling a defundraiser, and we'll get into some of the details of that as we go forward. I want to give a little bit of context to this. For the past couple of weeks here in Hamilton, there has been an action happening at City Hall with regards to defund the police by a group of young activists who have not only been stalwart and dedicated in everything that they've been doing, but who have received much solidarity from around the community, but also a lot of criticism, as well as people are struggling to understand and grasp what defunding the police means and why it's important. And one of the reasons we decided that we were going to do this tonight was to try and answer some of those questions, not just to answer those questions from their perspective, but to answer those questions from some different perspectives as well, hopefully to give a broad perspective on it. And during that time, also allow people to try and do one of two things: to either donate or to make a pledge to donate their time. So what we're doing is the donations, because one, they do have expenses to have the group commit to 24/7 24/7 presence out on a line somewhere. And those of you who are on this live stream, if you've ever been out on a strike line before, if you've ever been out on a protest line, if you've ever occupied a plant before, or you've occupied a work site before, you know you need to be geared up, and you know you need to have supplies, and you know you need people coming in from the outside to make sure that you have everything you need. So I'm going to give you a couple of options right now, and I'm going to be repeating them a lot throughout this live stream. And we're going to have a bunch of people come on, a bunch of guests come on to have a chat with us at different points to talk about. We're going to have some of the organizers from City Hall come on, from Defund HPS. We're going to have other people too to bring their perspectives. And we're hopefully going to not only explain maybe some things that you didn't think about when you thought about defund the police, but hopefully we might change some people's minds as well. Or at least we'll maybe find some open-minded people who might jump on this call. There's a reason why, as the Labor Council, we are doing this, because I will tell you that our Labor Council was, I believe, one of the first, if not the first, Labor Councils across this country that supported defund the police actions and recommendations going forward in Hamilton. Since then, several other groups have done so as well. And so other Labor Councils, soon afterwards, about a month or so afterwards, a month and a half afterwards, the Ontario Federation of Labor passed a motion, which from what I understand was unanimous at the Ontario Federation of Labor. So at the Ontario level, they passed a defund the police position. And I was part of a call probably about 6 weeks ago at the Canadian Labor Congress level, which passed everything at that level as well. So you're going to see my face for a little bit, but you're also, I want to thank Rosa, who's on our Labor Council executive, who's helping out on the call as well. And Rosa, don't be afraid to like pipe up on the mic occasionally if you want to, because if you see me talking for a long time, don't be afraid to jump in if you want to. But hopefully she'll be at some point every few minutes, she'll be sharing a screen cap that you'll be able to take a look at and see the addresses, which I'm going to repeat ad infinitum, ad nauseum over the course of our 3-hour live stream tonight. So I see that that's popping up right now. So we're calling this event the Defundraiser. You can donate money by e-transfer to info@defundhps.com, or you can pledge volunteer time over the next week from Monday to Sunday by going to hdlc.ca/friendraiser. So yes, we have had some fun with puns. So I'm going to repeat those, and I'm going to repeat them a lot as we go along. So e-transfer to send money, any amount. If it's $5, $10, $20, whatever it is, they can certainly use it. If you believe in this cause, please make sure that if you've got a few bucks that you can share, please do so. So that's info@defundhps.com. And if you don't have the cash that you can spare at this time, but you are somebody who has the time instead of the cash, and it seems like that's what we do on a daily basis as working class people, is we trade time for money, whatever that is. And those are our two most valuable things, our time, our labor, our money. And so you can pledge to volunteer hours from this coming Monday to Sunday. And whether that's 1 hour, 2 hours, all the way up to 15, 20 hours, whatever it is, feel free to do that. What we want to do by the end of this 3-hour live stream is hopefully educate some people, talk to some people, let people know where we're coming from, give them the opportunity to let them know where they're coming from, hopefully let you listen up and see how it goes. And like I say, first time we've ever done this, I think it's a bit ambitious. I will just be honest with you. I've been doing podcasting for a long time, and so I'm exercising my abilities to hopefully talk off the cuff for a long period of time. So I'm hoping against hope that we are able to get this going. So like I said, very soon, hopefully, we will be having some guests coming up. We have to understand too that ultimately we have spots for some of the organizers to come on, but these are the same organizers that are holding down the line at City Hall right now. So if you're from Hamilton, you know what's happened over the past little while. I can certainly give you my perspective of it, but they'll be able to give you a firsthand perspective of it when they come on. But they had a camp that was going very well. It was, I can tell you from somebody who's been on a lot of picket lines before, and been on a whole bunch of actions before, that it was a well-stocked line. It was well thought up. They had a medical tent. The video that you're viewing right now is one of the more shameful that I feel events that's happened over the last couple of years, especially with regards to our police force and with regards to some of the directions that some of our city workers were given with regards to bylaw officers. And that is the tearing down of the camp. This was a camp that was well established. There was not just defund the police people. There was also people who were in tents, who were houseless. And earlier this week, they had basically been given orders, and the police and bylaw came in and tore down these tents. The people, I mean, essentially they were living in them. These people's homes, all their possessions. When they take down these tents, they don't take them apart piece by piece and pack them up back in a bag again. They tear them down and they throw them in the garbage. And this was the situation, what people woke up to earlier this week on a rainy weekday. Probably because this is the time when a lot of people, a lot of allies weren't able to get down there. And so that's one of the challenges that has been faced. We know that this is one of those scenarios whereby there are probably many workers who were involved in this who didn't want to be involved in this. You can see how many police were on site, and at the time there were not that many people on site. It was early in the morning. A lot of times allies would come down to the site, usually after work, at sometimes during the day, and it was quite shameful at the way that these tents were pulled apart and destroyed. It was quite shameful in the way that everything was dismantled at what has been since the very beginning a peaceful protest. So some of you may have seen this video before. If you haven't, go to Defund HPS on Instagram and you can see the video certainly in full. I'm going to encourage you once again, please donate. Please feel free to donate to info@defundhps.com. Sorry, info@defundhps.com. That's right. And pledge your volunteer time at hdlc.ca/friendraiser. So, like I say, we're waiting right now for hopefully one of the organizers to jump on the Zoom call soon. But we understand that they are busy as well, and so that means that I get to keep talking at you for a little bit. And that's just okay. I half expected that this was going to be one of those things that this happened. We've thrown this together over a very short period of time. I'm going to give you my experience over the past couple of weeks as I've gone down to visit the site, and it's like one of those cases where, and this is probably a good time to correlate a couple of incidents that I've experienced personally. So I was thinking about this earlier, and in lieu of doing a traditional read off a piece of paper land acknowledgement, I'm going to intercede here with something a little bit different. Over the past several months, I've been going up and visiting the land defenders up at 1492 Landback Lane, and watching their struggle and their continued fight, and trying to support them, and trying to get our labor council and many other labor councils and unions to come on and support them. And we've just seen recently several unions have done that, and the OFL has done that as well, and that's been great. But that whenever I go up to 1492 Landback Lane, I come away with a sense of amazement. I'm a little bit in awe usually for a couple of hours after, at the dedication and at the level of dedication, intensity, solidarity, determination to do what they are doing. And it's rare to get that. Being involved in labor, you get snippets of it on occasion. You'll certainly see it sometimes when you're on a picket line, and I was on a picket line last year with my home union, and you get elements of that when you're out there for a day and you've lasted out there for a few hours, and you walk away and you feel good about yourself. You've shown some solidarity, all of that stuff. That's fantastic. When you find people that are willing to spend entire days, weeks, months, that level of dedication, and there have been many working class people and many union people who've in the past done these things. There have been people who have occupied plants. There have been people who have occupied work sites and taken on incredibly just amazing levels. Like, you think back to some of the labor actions with regards to long strikes, the RAND formula, the general strike, even as far back as Winnipeg, and you think about those levels of dedication that we don't see as much here today. And I get that sensibility when I visit 1492 Landback Lane. And so I do want to give them a shout out. Like I said, in a bit different from doing what would be traditionally a land acknowledgement. I want to give them a shout out and give them that level of solidarity and give them that level of just amazement at what they're able to do. And I didn't think that so soon after I was going to feel that same level of solidarity and that level of dedication And yet I found it in a group of young activists who down at Hamilton City Hall who have committed to fight for what they believe in, to fight for what's right, to fight against incredible odds, to fight against a police force, to fight against municipal politicians. Um, it's stunning to me. I like to think that, back when I was younger, that I would be able to do something like that. And I don't know if my headspace was there yet. And now it's very tough. And it's tough for a lot of us as we get older and we have families and we have things to do. But what we can do as allies is we can support. And that's what this is about. This entire 3-hour long live stream is about what we can do as allies and how we can step up. So I'm going to mention the links again. Donate, help them out. They need supplies. They need to refuel. They need to get everything back on track again after their camp was torn down. Please donate by e-transferring to info@defundhps.com. Please, please, please do that if you can. And also, if you want to pledge volunteer time, you can also do that at hdlc.ca/friendraiser. Sorry. So those are two ways that you can do that. And I would advise, as much, if you can do both, that's fantastic. And here's another thing I'll say too about volunteering time there. It's peaceful. It's meant to be peaceful. It's low intensity. I know we just showed you pictures of police tearing down tents. Like that was for a span of half an hour to an hour after a long stretch of time. If you go down there right now, it's a peaceful, most people sitting on chairs and just occupying the space. They have activities every day. They make sure that everyone's up and moving around. They make sure that everyone who's there, has something warm to drink, has a bite to eat. If you can get out there and help and do that, that's great. So what we're going to do, we're trying to, like I say, we're in the middle of trying to line up as many people as possible to try and get some people on. So hopefully they will be coming on soon. And I am sitting here waiting to see if, so Rosa, you can message me if we have anybody in the chat, in the waiting room right now. Okay, so what I will do right now, I'll go to who we originally had scheduled as our second guest, but he's going to become our first guest. And so I want to invite Cameron Crutch onto the call.
Greg actually just came on, so I'll let him in.
Greg just came on. So Cameron, sorry, we're just gonna bump you for a quick bit. So Greg came on the call. We're gonna get him on right away. So Greg, hopefully you can hear me. I know that you're probably just connecting. There you go. How are you? How's it going, brother?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm assuming it's good to get back inside for a couple of minutes.
No, I had to run back. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was on site and I was like, oh shit, it's 6.
So thanks for coming on. I know that there's so much going on right now. First of all, before I go any further, can you take a minute to just introduce yourself and kind of quickly how you got involved with not only the current action that's taking place right now, but with the ongoing fight for defund in Hamilton?
My name is Greg Dungan. I have been one of the organizers with HWDSB Kids Needs Help. And since then, I've just been working on pretty much the liberation of Black peoples in Hamilton. So whether that looks like defund HPS stuff, or whether that looks like putting together stuff with the Black Youth Council that used to be at Bernie Custis. I just try my best to set a good example of what a Black man in today's society should look like. So the reality is through a ton of different volunteer positions, I've started to increase my volunteerism into defunding type stuff. Um, I usually do. I usually try and MC one two event here and there. I was also at the walk out and the sit-in for the January 29th school board meeting in regards to the removal of SROs and the SRO program. Um, and that was also a pretty magnificent day, if you ask me, like similar to the work we're doing now and we've been doing over this last 11, 12 days. The walkout moment, that school board meeting was a symbol of community where we had all came together and we all pushed to see a change we'd love to see and we need to see in our community, for the greater good of everyone who has been affected at the hands of police,
Mhm.
including the youth that continue to have with to face problems and issues they deal with in schools with policing.
Um, so I mean, there seems to have been a natural evolution of a lot of the people who were involved or who still are involved with HWDSP Kids Need Help and the transition over to defund HPS. But it looks like you've also gained some new supporters and organizers along the way. To be honest with you, I was shocked when I first showed up down at the site at City Hall. I forget whether it was the first or second day. I think it was late the first day. Um, at the level of organization and the level of thought put into the site that you had there with regards to the medic tent and the food supply and everything that was all laid out there. The amount of planning that went into this to make sure that everybody had a space and to make sure that, quite frankly, I don't know if you could have predicted how many people were going to come down to the site who were houseless and were going to jump in as a support for that. But you needed to have all the infrastructure in place to support that influx of people as well. How much of a challenge was that coming into this?
Well, I'm not gonna act like I wasn't stressing, but at the end of the day, we took it day by day. We kept going for we took each moment for what it was, and we worked with what we had. The reality is it's more or less the sense of trying to trying to be the community you want to see, right? We were pushing forward with the motion or the notion that at the end of the day, a lot of the encampments that have been put up or that were in place in Hamilton have been taken down or torn down. And we know that there's a lot of risks to being in an encampment, um, which is why we had medical, the medical tent. Um, did it suffice for everything we've encountered? For the most part. But at the end of the day, if need be, we also do have that community support behind us, right? And we were in the planning. It was it was a process of trying to remain as vigilant as possible in regards to just making sure that should there be an influx of should there be an influx of houses people, we had everything we need to be able to keep them safe, give them shelter, keep them healthy, and give them food. Um, and past when past what we had expected to happen, that is when the community support had came in. That is when we would do call outs and have people come drop off tents, come drop off sleeping bags, warm clothes, hot coffee, donuts, food, anything we need, the community provided. And that was really a sense of companionship and a sense of really just compassion to have for the houseless people that have to live this life in the day to day. And we aren't just outside because we believe that us yelling and screaming is going to make a difference. We're outside because the idea is, and the reality is these people, the houses community in Canada and in Hamilton, has to live this life every day. They have to worry about the fear of overdose. They have to worry about the fear of death on a day to day because you don't know how you're going to get your next meal. You don't know how you are going to get dollars to put clothes on your back. You don't know. Um, and it makes it hard because there's also a lot of uncertainties about being houses, especially when addiction workers are underfunded, social workers are underfunded, mental health workers are underfunded. And the same institution that continues to cycle or that continues a perpetuated cycle of violence against you and that continues to oppress you is the only thing in your city that is pulling out surpluses on a yearly basis. That's the idea of that is why we have the idea of defunding the police so that we can then foster new connections and foster economic growth in the industries of housing, of mental health workers, of social workers, of even financial literacy workers, right? To show people how to be able to be independent as well as have the ability to not have to worry about being stuck on the street.
How is it that a lot of, and you're hearing this probably a lot too, especially through media, there's a lot of people that as soon as you say defund the police, they instantly get their backs up, they get afraid. There's even people that I've spoken to within the labor movement who they hear defund the police. You explain it to them a little bit, they kind of understand a little bit. But as soon as, like, say, I know a couple of the chants when we were down on site, have the word abolish in them. As soon as you say abolish, it that then scares people. Um, I mean, my mentality is always, um, like there's different levels of the left, so to speak. And we always find people who are like, we agree with 95% of what each other are saying, but that last 5%, we're going to fight over it. Um, it's always been my opinion that let's not fight over the word abolish. If we get that far, then we've probably done something good. What is it that you can say to people, especially people who are of your age, who hear defund the police for the first time and they've been raised their entire lives, um, maybe with privilege and maybe never having to worry about police? What are some of the things that you can tell them to have them understand why this is important and why there are so many young people that seem to be transitioning to this idea, that perhaps, um, perhaps in Hamilton, we have definitely an increasing cycle of poverty that exists in this city, and we have very definitely working class people who are struggling. But we do also in this city, in certain parts of this city, have people that have incredible privilege, not only through class, perhaps through race, perhaps through a whole bunch of other things. How do you get your experience across to them and let them know that this is why it shouldn't be a scary thing? This is why you believe in it, and this is why we think that this is the right way to go. When we say defund, it's not meant to be a negative thing, it's meant to be a positive thing.
So the idea of defunding the police is really the idea in solely investing into the community. Um, I forget who it was, but one of the counselors had said that maybe if that one time I was teaching a financial literacy financial literacy course, and we need to stop criminalizing Black youth, um, which none of that even made sense. But at the same time, that is there's a little piece to that that we should still hold on to. If we if we reinvested the money into the community, we would have been able to reinvest in education. And what that could also look like is reinvesting in healthcare, reinvesting in housing, reinvesting in unions, reinvesting in benefits like medical benefits and all of that. Free healthcare, free tuition, if we defund the police. The police have $171 million as opposed to the city having 158 million for its operating cost. No other organization or city industry is allotted that much for its budget. And if we defund the police and invest in community, what we can do is through investing in education is we can get rid of the stigma and the criminalization of Black and racialized youth, which in turn would also allow the space and potential for Black and Indigenous and racialized youth to help branch out and grow their communities in regards to economic strength, um, and even in just low income communities, because we have been trained to see, or there has been a plethora of research in regards to the disproportionate impact that racism has and policing has on Black and Indigenous and racialized communities. And if we don't take the time to acknowledge the disproportionate impact of how I think it was 63% of Black youth and the decrease in are suspended or expelled before graduation. If we don't take the time to acknowledge those numbers and acknowledge the facts that there is prison, a school to prison pipeline, um, and that these systems, similar to policing and incarceration and all systems of governance in regards to policing, is in reality the only thing that's stifling our potential as Canadians, as human beings, then that is why we must graft together the idea of defunding police, because it's more than just the idea that police perpetuate violence. It has now become a societal thing that police have ingrained into cultures the detrimental impact of violence that has been perpetuated by police.
Well, when we see police forces going out there and buying armored vehicles and buying things that look like tanks and spending millions of dollars on such acquisitions, it's hard to imagine that any city. I've never seen anything happen in Hamilton whereby a tank needs to roll up to it. I've never seen anything in Hamilton where the amount of officers that were down at City Hall the first night that you were set up there. I think there was 7 or 8 cruisers out back, 3 or 4 vans, and you maybe had about 24, 25 people out front by the time that I came, and it was about like maybe 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And the amount of cruisers that were there and the amount of money that is spent on just monitoring people who are engaged in a peaceful protest is just staggering. And I think a lot of this comes down to the will of city council as well, and a lot of this comes down to the fact that, if city council was willing to spend more money and to, quite frankly, if they were willing to have add some value added taxes onto people to help pay for housing, to help pay for education, to help pay for all of these things, probably people wouldn't be too as concerned about looking at the amount of money. And I'm not saying necessarily your group, but I'm saying people in general wouldn't have as much of a concern about looking at the amount of money that gets spent on police. But you see, I think it's 40% of the budget every single year of the city's budget is spent on police. It's just a massive amount. And when the mayor says that, you know, we've got this great plan to build affordable housing over the next 5 years, we've got $5 million for it. Like, it's an absolute drop in the bucket, and it's certainly not going to be enough. What can you build for $5 million over 5 years that's going to solve housing for this city, especially when you saw
Maybe a townhouse?
yeah, that's about it. You know, maybe a townhouse complex that will house what, a dozen people, which, don't get me wrong, we'll take, but we need way more than that. Um, I do want to let you go and get back to the site, because we hopefully are going to have on somebody else from the site at 8 o'clock. But I want to encourage people, e-transfer info at defundhps.com. I was telling people earlier before you jumped on, the money is well spent and it is well used to make sure that people who come out and help are supplied up, and make sure that everyone on site there has something warm to drink at night and has something to eat, and has the resources that they need. And if you want to pledge your volunteer time, because I know that sometimes those numbers can get thin, sometimes overnights and stuff like that, and when it gets cold, you can pledge volunteer time by going to hdlc.ca/friendraiser. Greg, thanks so much for popping on.
No, thank you, Anthony.
And
Have a good night.
And have a good night out there. I know it's going to be another chilly one, and hopefully we'll see one of your comrades in a little bit coming on to tell us their perspective as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, Greg. Take care.
Have a good one.
So those addresses again, info at defundhps.com to do the e-transfers. If you've never done an e-transfer before, what I would suggest you do is send an email to that email address and say, maybe you don't even have money, but maybe you just want to bring a warm meal down to help them out. Maybe you want to drop off some blankets. Maybe you want to drop off some sleeping bags that you've got that you don't need anymore. If you send an email to info at defundhps.com, they will answer you and they will let you know what they need. Or you can follow defundhps on Twitter, on Instagram, and you can find out some information there as well. And if you have time to go down there, the reason why we're taking pledges, by the way, to be honest with you, is just to show that this community of working class people, labor people, and I've got a lot of labor people who are on our feed, on our YouTube feed, and people who follow us on Facebook. But I'm not just reaching out to labor people; I'm reaching out to everybody. Coming on the call right now, we've got a fantastic ally and a great coalition partner with the Labor Council, Cameron Kretsch. Cameron, thank you for jumping on the call tonight.
Good to see you, Anthony. No problem. Glad to be here.
So one of the reasons that I asked you on the call is because I know in the past few years, you've held a role on the executive of Pride Hamilton. And many people in Hamilton who've been around for a while know that there have been, let's just say, some not too positive incidents that have arisen at Pride over the past couple of years. I'm wondering if you can give us kind of the short history of Pride's engagement with the Hamilton Police Service over the past couple of years, because I wanted people to understand that this just isn't about young racialized students who are concerned about this. This is people from a way broader swath of Hamiltonians who are concerned about defunding the police, about making sure that we can reallocate some of those funds.
Yeah, the history of policing in Pride has been a pretty long and unfortunately not a good one in Hamilton. The last few years, for sure, there's been a real concerted effort by police to say, hey, we want to come down there, have a recruitment booth, and folks at Pride. And I'm not speaking for Pride. I was there organizing, and I was on the ground and saw what was happening. And, they said, we don't feel safe. This isn't a safe environment for us to be here. This isn't a safe experience to have officers in the park with guns, with uniforms, in spaces that are meant to be celebratory, but like, as everyone knows about Pride, also spaces of resistance, right? Pride is both of those things. It's a space for people to come together and celebrate, a space for political resistance, but more than anything, it's a safe space. My first Toronto Pride, one of my first Toronto Prides, I remember holding my partner's hand, walking down the street, and this kind of amazing feeling of being like, wow, there's no one around here surveilling me. This is totally permitted and allowed. I can hold my partner's hand, not be scared. And that's the kind of space that we need to have in a Pride and in other Two-Spirit and LGBTQIA plus spaces. And so there's that tension there. And I would say it's unfortunately a bit of a weird obsession that police organizations have with pride organizations. I don't really see this kind of animosity or weirdness between other organizations in the police. I don't see them really amorously trying to get a booth at the Festival of Friends, and then when it doesn't work out, freaking out on the media. And so there's something going on here about about oppressed communities, about communities that have been marginalized by state authority, and Pride certainly has a lot of history of that. And people in these communities are linked. This isn't isolated work. This isn't happening in isolation. And in the last couple of years, there've been some pretty violent attacks at Pride, starting in 2018 when white supremacists came down there, and of course in 2019 when it became internationally known for that kind of violence, where police willfully stood back.
How much of I remember a couple of years before, it might have just been the year before, a couple of years before Hamilton, how much of a bellwether moment was the BLM's actions at Toronto Pride in insisting that the police weren't involved? How much of a point in time was that with regards to informing maybe different Pride organizations around the country that, hey, we can ask for this, and we can insist upon this? Because it seemed like up until that point, while I would guess that there was many in the community who wanted to do that, there was probably pushback, and there probably still is pushback at the Hamilton level as well. But it seemed like the coverage that got in Toronto really helped probably push a lot of pride celebrations across the country towards that.
Yeah, it was a huge moment, and I remember watching some of that, watching the coverage of that, and seeing the reaction from a pride organization that I think wasn't prepared to deal with this kind of really just civil disobedience from folks who were like, we're not moving, we're not going. We get to take up this space. Pride spaces are Black spaces. Pride spaces are Black trans spaces. Pride is here because of that political resistance. And I think it informed a lot of the decisions that Pride Toronto made. We saw kind of a little mini, almost a meltdown inside of Pride Toronto, and all kinds of changes and things happened as a result of that. And I think other prides took notice. Pride Toronto is an exception in a way. We're talking about millions of people who descend on the city of Toronto for Pride in a non-COVID time. It's not like your Hamilton Pride where we have, a few thousand. It's not like a Perth Pride where you're getting a couple hundred people, right? It's an epic event. And so it was a touchstone for so many. And I think that we should be thinking about the non-siloed nature of so many of the movements that are going on inside Pride spaces and outside, right? Like what's happening down at City Hall today is not distinct from and separate from the struggles that people in Two-Spirit and LGBTQA plus communities have had. It's not indistinct from what happened at Pride. We were down there taking up space too after Pride and having rallies, peaceful rallies. And the same behavior was happening from leaders, right? So we're seeing a constant pattern here. I think that, and I'm just so proud and so much admiration for the folks who are holding it down at City Hall right now, the work they're doing, because this is about confronting white supremacy, right? And this is about continuing to do that work, and no one can do it in isolation.
Now, you've been after your election run a few years ago, you've been, I know, an active watcher and active participant in a lot of dialogue online with regards to municipal politics, and you're probably aware better than most people as to the process that this would have to go through. We just had news today out of Seattle that they are defunding their police force up to 17%. And we've seen that certainly the Hamilton Police Services Board here in Hamilton, the councillors on the board certainly don't have the will, the ones who are there anyway. And I'm looking around the council table in my mind and thinking how many others have the will. It's a real uphill battle that the activists who are out in front of City Hall have to face. Is there an intersection that you see where there have been allies that maybe haven't shown up yet will start to maybe gaining greater numbers over the next little while. I mean, you run the risk, I think, and we've seen this. We've both been involved with labor actions before. You run the risk of petering out or growing. Those are the two things. It's really hard to stay stagnant. So, what do you see as the opportunities for growth with the actions that are happening down there now? I know that we've received on the labor side of it, there has been more groups that have signed on in terms of being interested. Having the Ontario Federation of Labor jump on has been great. Are you seeing anything particular from communities or coalitions that you're watching with regards to allyship or willingness to kind of jump behind this as well?
I'm seeing a lot of conversations happening that just weren't happening before, right? So we talk about a lot of the BLM movement stuff that happened and how that started conversations in the summer that really sparked rallies and protests in Hamilton. And now we're seeing what's happening, and it's creating a different conversation because, like your past guest and you talked about, right? People seem to have a sense of fear or anxiety around this idea of defunding, and I think that's starting to go away as people are getting more comfortable with this notion of the idea that what that really means is just reinvesting in community, and it means that, and it's just a word, but that word is driving the conversation and keeping the conversation active and keeping people talking about it. And people being down there with their bodies is keeping that conversation going. And I think it is having an impact. I think more and more people are saying, look, we've got to step up and take notice. There's an issue here of over policing. We have a huge budget problem where we have 171 million for police, 93 for fire, and around 50 for paramedics. When we all know that the folks who can provide services to someone during a mental health emergency or during a medical emergency are paramedics. Like the pyramid is the wrong way around. And I think more people are starting to see that and say to themselves, hey, there's something going on here. And maybe they're going to come at this from the perspective of Reformation language. They're not going to be comfortable with this notion of saying, I want to defund, they want to say we want to reform. But I think people are starting to get on board because, again, of folks being down in front of City Hall, I urge you to donate to them because they are literally holding it down and doing the work of making sure this critical conversation happens. To your point, though, about watching the city and what's possible, I think we got to talk about that for a second, right? Like we're talking about money and talking about defunding. I get it. It seems like an impossible ask. 90% or 85% of the Hamilton Police Services budget is human resources money. It's about benefits and salaries, right? So where are you going to get all the money you need? And I think the answer is by looking at the way it's being spent, right? In the last 5 years, we've had an increase in the budget, but not the same increase in staff. So there's a gap there. And the question is like, it's around $30 million, that gap too. Where's that money going? What's happening to it? And so I think that council can keep saying, look, the Police Services Act says we're not allowed to do this, and we can't do this, and we can't do that. What you can do is you can make this a priority conversation. You can bring a motion to council by just raising your hand and saying you want to do it. And you can have the conversation and start asking the tough questions of the Police Services Board and of the police service to say, how can we do this? And that's one of the things I'm not hearing. I'm hearing a lot of the mayor and sort of his cronies are all kind of, defund. We don't like that. And I feel like saying to them, and I have said to some of them, hey, what are you doing? What are your solutions? What are you doing here to actually make this a priority? You're hearing your community cry out. You're hearing your community say they care about this. Constituents are constantly contacting you saying so. What are you doing to move the needle? Except for saying, well, I don't like the way they're saying it. And that's kind of, tone policing. Has a long history in Hamilton. It happened at Pride. It happened after Pride. We don't like that. You're criticizing the police for their behavior. Sorry. Sometimes they screw up, and sorry, sometimes they have to be held accountable. And if our government's not prepared to hold our policing accountable, we're in huge trouble, right? Because they're the ones with the guns. And if we can't hold these folks accountable, I'm very worried.
What do you think the entry point is on the conversation with people who are sitting on the fence right now, who maybe haven't made up their mind one way or the other? They don't like the term defund. They don't like the threat of abolish, because that word comes up quite often. I've tried to, over the past few days, make the point that, with regards to, the mayor has said, well, we don't make budgets by defunding. And it's like, well, we kind of do make budgets by defunding. I mean, all the time, if you set your budget, you have to take money out of one envelope to fill another envelope, or you have to take it from one line to move on to another line. Ultimately, we have the part that amazes me is that we've got an oval of councillors who seem to all be tax hawks in this city, and are so concerned over even 1 cent of a tax increase on a year-by-year basis. Yet, when given the opportunity to reallocate some of those taxes and maybe find a better value for them, just throw up their hands and say it can't be done. Is that a way in as much as I believe that we've been trained to become paranoid of the word taxes these days? Is the way in to somebody who is a tax hawk to say, why aren't you willing to look at efficiencies? I mean, we're not saying we want you to spend more. We're not saying we want you to increase taxes. We're saying we want you to better use taxes. And I think there's a use case for that. I don't know, does that convince counselors, or is that a better argument for people that we're just talking to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the budget season is upon us right now at council, and they're going to be squashing numbers and moving numbers around to try and make things happen. And I think that, yeah, it can be a way of talking about efficiencies. Right now, they're asking for $4 million more next year, and they're operating with a $500,000 surplus so far. Last year, they had a $1.2 million surplus, which they spent on high-powered rifles. So I think that a way in for people, I think, to this is to ask themselves, what is it that they're objecting to? There's some folks on social media who are saying, people are out there challenging the laws. Cool. You know where the laws are being challenged every single day? In court, in front of judges, by lawyers, 24/7. So it's not that people mind the laws are being challenged, it's that they mind the way this is happening. And they say, and there's this kind of, polite correction of Black folks, frankly. They're trying to say, look, like, you're acting out. And this is a long history back from, hundreds of years of that kind of correction, that I think is steeped in something that I think a lot of white folks in our community aren't really willing to confront. But what we can say as a way in is, what has happened? Wait a minute. I know you and lots of other people, myself, have gone down to council and said, can we put a budget freeze on that? Can we reduce the budget here? Can we reallocate this? Can we take back this surplus? This is all the kind of language people have used, right? This kind of what I consider to be the language that council responds to, right? How can we work within your system to make this happen? How can we do this in a positive and friendly way? And that's been going on for decades in Hamilton and decades in North America, where we've been saying this and trying to speak the language that speaks to council. And it's not working. So peaceful protests like this, which is pushing the conversation, I hope people recognize that that people have tried everything. Everything has been tried up to this point of trying to sit down with people and have private meetings after private meeting after private meeting to go down and delegate. And now we need our councilors, to lead. I do think it does make this tricky, because right now there's so much about policing I don't think we understand, right? We have a notion that, for instance, policing prevents crime or keeps us safe. So again, trying to unpack some of these ideas and ask ourselves how, in what way. And I think that's going to be a way to do it. And I think maybe it might need some of our amazing talented artists in our communities, other kinds of folks, to find ways to communicate with people in ways they can receive. Because the word defund just simply means to take money out of. And to go back to what you said, that's all we've been seeing when it comes to social services, ODSP, Ontario Works, you name it, have been defunded for generations, right? Money's been taken out of the hands of people in the working class and hands of the people who need it the most for generations through the speech of defunding. What we're saying now is we need to right that wrong.
And in many cases, the defunding of the other social services has gone to things like policing. And so it probably needs to be equitably shifted back. Before I ask you one final question, I do want to just remind people I have to remind myself every so often that one of the reasons we're here is trying to get people to donate. So please, if you are interested in helping out the people who are down in front of City Hall right now with their activism to defund the police, please go to info@defundhps.com and you can do an e-transfer immediately to them. E-transfer info@defundhps.com, and the money will get to them immediately. Or if you've got something else that you would like to donate, I know that I was speaking with a couple of the organizers the other night. They're looking for blankets, they're looking for sleeping bags, they're looking for supplies. If you want to bring down a hot meal to them, they'd be happy for that too. Send information to that email and you can, they will respond. And if you want to volunteer your time, which I know that they are looking for as well, because sometimes depending on the time of day, depending on the temperature, they are currently under the covered part of the entrance of City Hall, which means that even if it's raining a little bit, you should be able to stay dry, and you should be able to have a seat because they've got some chairs out there. If you want to commit to some hours over the next couple of weeks or the next week anyway, go to hdlc.ca/friendraiser and commit to some hours there. So maybe the last thing that I want to wrap up with you, Cameron, and I thank you so much for your time as you've given us a lot so far, is it might be it might actually be two-part question, or it might just be two separate questions. Maybe I'm reserving them back. One kind of follows up on what you previously asked, which is I found that over the last year or two with our city council, the only way that you get things done is through embarrassment. That reason, that rational argument, that all of that stuff oftentimes goes by the wayside. As many head nods as you will get when you walk into a counselor's office and have them nod their head back at you and say they agree with you, when it comes to a vote, it doesn't get done unless you can find a way to make it so unpalatable to them to vote against or to vote for or against something. I'm wondering if you're sensing that trend too, and I don't know what that says about politics in our city when the only remaining strategy that we have is embarrassment. But I'm wondering if you've seen that as well, or if I'm just being cynical about it.
I have seen that a lot, and I think it's a depressing thought, frankly. That's the way that we have to engage with people is by doing this thing that they want us to do, which is to pressure them to act. They want people to call their office and let them know what's going on, and I think it's a symptom of a lack of connection to community, really. I mean, I've spoken to a counselor and had this conversation with them about this movement, actually, and said, look, like, it's just a matter of you taking your hand at that table, raising it up and saying, I'd like to put a motion on the table to talk about defunding the police. That's all you got to do. That's the kind of power they have, Anthony. It's just one hand raised up in the air to say, I want to have this discussion. And they can't do it. Instead, what they're doing is they're making, as far as I'm concerned, making grassroots communities, making the folks holding it down at City Hall push for the kinds of things that they should be pushing for. They know, everybody sitting around that council table, they know that this is an issue, that they know that there's issues with policing and within policing. All of them know this 100%. So why aren't they leading? And I think part of it comes down to a lack of connection to community and the people we vote in. If you've got the trusted communities, if you're connected to the communities that you are part of in your ward in this city, it's a no-brainer. You don't need to go out there and ask your constituents. You don't need to wait for phone calls. You know what's up. And when you know what's up and you're in there acting like a representative in a seat of government, then you bring those issues to the government and you have those conversations. But right now, I do understand, like, there's a minority of counselors in that space who I think are genuinely connected to communities and who have the moral integrity to do this kind of work. And I think we have a majority who just been in there way too long, who are just way too comfortable, and who think politics is about a network of exchanges, a network of favors, a network of you say something nice about me, I'll let you have this, rather than representative government, right? Yeah. And so I think that's a lot of what it is, unfortunately, and it is shameful that we're having from the outside so much to do the work that they could do so easily from the inside.
There's also that risk reward element as well, that when you're an incumbent and you're running as an incumbent, to take something which is politically risky, admittedly, like defund the police, doesn't necessarily generate the reward when you're an incumbent and you're likely to be reelected anyway. And that's probably one of the scary things about it. The last question I'm going to ask you is to get back to kind of the core reason why we brought you on. I know that you mentioned off the top that you're not speaking for Pride Hamilton right now, but you've also had a unique perspective on the LGBTQ2SI community in Hamilton over the past few years. what do you see as the future going forward with that community? And I know that you can't speak for the community. I'm just asking you to crystal ball this thing. But with regards to not only Pride festivities, but just with the community as a whole. And I mean, I can tell you there's a strong intersection between that community and labor as well. So I mean, I certainly hear some perspectives on the police as well. What do you see as the next couple of years with regards to that relationship? Is that something where you can see there is any goodwill that has been fostered over the last couple of years, or is it kind of still in the same place that we've been in for the last year or so? And really, at this point, are we looking at a change needed at the top versus maybe what some of the individual officers are doing?
Yeah, I mean, this is an individual. It's not about good apples and bad apples. It's about a system that's in place. That system, unfortunately, does also have some leaders at the top who can impact it and can make change, either positive or negative. I think if I'm getting my crystal ball, I think that things aren't necessarily going to get better. I don't see a willingness from the people who can sit down and have conversations, being, wanting to do that. I think I tell the story a fair bit because I feel like it's descriptive of the problem and what I think we need to contend with. 2019 Pride stood there and watched as friends and others were injured by white supremacists who were attacked by white supremacists, and a group of amazing folks came out and defended that event. And I truly thought, I suppose I didn't have this thought to myself, but I expected that the first call the mayor would have made was to check in, an email, send some folks down there. How's everyone doing? Is everyone okay? Instead, it was right away a kind of PR discussion about how really it was Pride organizers and Pride defenders who were responsible for this whole thing. When that's your mentality and you don't want to sit down with people and talk, we see it happening right now. He's hiding, right? He doesn't want to have these difficult conversations because, as you pointed out rightly, it's risky to have conversations about policing. Yeah, but it's not nearly as risky as the sort of things that young folks, trans folks, and other folks who are coming down to Pride organizations put themselves out there just to try and celebrate. The risk to them and their bodily harm is quite a lot higher than you sitting down for a conversation. I don't see the chief. I don't see the mayor. I don't see most counselors wanting to put forward that goodwill. For them, it seems like a political game. And for people in these communities, it's about our lives. It's about being able to live, express ourselves, exist. And they're just not understanding that. So until we get folks behind in that horseshoe and we get folks in positions of leadership in this city who lead with compassion and empathy, who can seem to get over themselves enough to sit down and have a conversation in public, we'll get somewhere. Because right now it's very status quo. I think that we are seeing some pretty great things happening at the Pride organization. I can't speak for them, but I can give a hint as to what's going on. For a long time, we've had a real small group kind of steering the boat and trying to hold it down to keep the organization together. I mean, I think everyone would understand what it would be like to go through kind of what the organization did after 2019 Pride and remain intact. But happy to say we're like a week away from appointing a whole new board, and it's much more representative of the community. So I think we're going to see safer, more inclusive, bigger, more wonderful, more resistive prides in the future. And I just can't wait to see what's going to happen. Next year's Pride 30th anniversary, the 30th anniversary of Pride in Hamilton. So I think it's going to be a big deal. And if the folks in this town aren't ready to come along and celebrate and resist with us, then we're going to keep having that tension.
That's awesome. Cameron, thank you so much for coming on and giving us that perspective. Like I say, I think with all of the, and I dare say, I'm going to be critical of the media here, with not enough coverage of what's been going on at City Hall. All of the focus has been on just the group that's there, and there should be definite focus on them because they are doing incredible work down there. But that doesn't mean that the defund the police concept is lost on many other groups in this city, and I think people need to really consider that as they go forward. So thanks so much for coming on. I know that I've seen you down several times at the in front of City Hall, and I know that I will see you down there probably very soon again. I appreciate your perspective and coming on here and and letting us know about some of those communities that communities and coalition partners that we all need to work together with as we move forward. So thanks a lot.
You bet. And everyone, please donate if you can. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks, Cam. Take care. So like we said, please donate. info@defundhps.com. You can e-transfer there. And like I said, if you've never done an e-transfer before, I know a lot of people who are younger are used to doing e-transfers now. I can tell you, people of my generation maybe aren't so used to doing e-transfers. I absolutely love them. Maybe you're used to signing checks. And checks can sometimes be difficult. I'm sure if you emailed them and you had a check for them, they could probably work that out because there is a bank account there, obviously. But if you've never done an e-transfer before and you can get somebody to help you do that, basically it's just sending money over an email account, and it is secure, and you can do it on almost all of the bank. If you got a banking app on your phone or on a tablet or something like that, then you can do it, or you can certainly do it via the banking website. If you do any of your banking electronically, you can do it that way. And so, but like I say, even if you don't have money right now, there's other ways that you can contribute as well. One, they are looking for supplies. They're always looking for supplies because as numbers grow down there, and we try and make sure that the numbers grow down there. As the numbers grow down there, one of the things that we are looking for is blankets. A lot of the stuff that they had before that raid that you saw earlier, a lot of the stuff that they had was taken, and it is gone, and it was thrown into garbage bins, and it has been carted off to the dump. All of these supplies that could have been used by people, even if the camp was going to be broken up, so to speak, and even if it was going to be, dismantled, there's no reason why those supplies could not have been reused by people. That being said, they certainly need things which will keep them warm at night. So like blankets, like sleeping bags. If you've had blankets and sleeping bags for the last little while, just lying around the house and you think, I'm never going to be using these things again, that might be one of the things that you end up doing is making sure that we can get some of those supplies to them as well. Like I say, if you have the ability to take down some warm food to them, that's great. If you have the ability to bring down some coffee to them, that's great. I know my partner and I have done that in the past. We've picked up some hot chocolate and we've done it that way. Whatever works for you. Donations would be appreciated by the groups down there. And I know for those of you who don't necessarily have the cash to throw around, pledge volunteer time, commit to hours. We have a little Google form right now that you can go on to at hdlc.ca/friendraiser and commit to some hours of volunteer time. And trust me, I know that some of you might be thinking, I wish I could give a donation. I wish I could help them out from a monetary perspective. I can tell you as somebody who has spent a lot of time on picket lines and a lot of times on protests that ultimately having people there is not only good for the optics of it, for how it looks, but it is inspiring to know that you have people who are standing alongside you and to have somebody new to have a conversation with. It can be long minutes and hours when you're spending hours and hours or sometimes days out on an occupation somewhere, and having new people to talk to, new people who support you, having a fresh perspective on things, sometimes having people just bringing you news that you hadn't heard of before, or things that just you hadn't considered. Maybe there's something that's gone on. Trust me, it's very difficult sometimes to even understand what's going on a day-to-day basis on the news when you're actually out standing on a line somewhere. It's not like you're at home sitting in front of TV watching a news network, or it's not like you're in front of your computer watching a news ticker scroll by. So having people show up at the site is huge. And so we're asking people to pledge so that they know that they feel appreciated, and they know that even if you can't contribute money, that you're willing to contribute time, because that's in many ways just as valuable, sometimes even more valuable. So if you go to hdlc.ca/friendraiser, the way that that's spelled, by the way, is FRIENDRAISER. So I would certainly encourage you to get on there. We are expecting hopefully within the next little while, one of the other organizers from the site to jump on. We hope they do that. By the way, if you want to follow the most up-to-date stuff, Defund HPS is their Twitter handle and their Instagram handle as well. If you want to do that, you can certainly follow what they post on a regular basis. They've had some concerts there over the past couple nights. And I think, if you go out there, you should be able to hear some good music. They do have some amplification out there, so they always try and keep it a little bit upbeat. They always try and make sure that they're playing music. They're trying to make sure that people are keeping warm. It gets tough. It gets tough. The other day, this got a little bit of press. Is some of them got into City Hall, and originally they're just parked outside of City Hall. And the City Hall security is trying to keep them out, but they got into City Hall in order to demand a conversation, with the mayor, saying that we want to have this conversation. One of the ways that, one of the reasons that we're not moving out of here is because you refuse to talk to us about this. And if you followed what happened over the last couple of days, you know that there were somewhere between 17 and 18 tickets handed out. People were detained. People were dragged out of City Hall. This is part of a peaceful protest, and it really calls into question this level of communication and accountability of some of our municipal politicians and the ability to have that meaningful conversation, even though it may end up in disagreement. Because right now we know it ends up in disagreement. And I will say this, that I have experienced a lot of lobbying efforts in my time where I've walked into a politician's office and tried to convince them of one perspective or another and have them say that they disagree with me. And I would rather have somebody who outright tells me that they disagree with me than nod their head and say that they're going to support an idea and then don't end up supporting it. But still, there is that need to listen. There are arguments that need to be made, and there are opinions that need to be heard. And especially if you're representing an entire city or an entire ward in this city, you need to listen to those conversations, and you need to have those tough conversations. And that's something that we talk about a lot now. So we are waiting. We're hopefully going to have one of the other organizers pop on soon. What we are going to do, I'm going to take just a quick 2-minute break, a comfort break, refill my beverage, and we'll put the main donation info back up on the screen. We'll be back in a couple of minutes, and we will get this going again. And we've got a couple more great contributors and speakers jumping on. They will be on soon. So we'll be back probably in about 2 or 3 minutes. And stay tuned, and hopefully we'll be able to give you some more interesting tidbits to think about, or some interesting information as you consider whether you want to donate or not. E-transfers to info@defundhps.com or volunteer time at hdlc.ca/friendraiser. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Hey everyone, we're back doing our Defundraiser. And for those of you who have been following thus far, thank you. I'm going to be the first to admit we've run into some hiccups along the way. We've had a couple of guests that have had to cancel at the last minute, and I understand that. We tried to do this on short notice, mostly because of the circumstances that happened over the past week. And so just to recap, some of you, and I know that those of you who've been on this call from like the beginning know that I'm probably repeating some stuff over and over and over again, and I appreciate that. But I'm doing that for the benefit of those people who are just jumping on, for maybe 20 minutes at a time or 15 minutes at a time. Very quickly, before I forget again, donate. If you wish to help the Defund the Police movement down at City Hall right now in Hamilton. This is our Defundraiser. Donate by e-transferring to info@defundhps.com or email them if you've got another way to make a contribution, including and especially warm weather gear, blankets, propane heaters that you might have had laying around for years but still work and are still in good condition, blankets, and pledge volunteer time by going to hdlc.ca/friendraiser. And if you can do that, make some contributions to committing to the idea of that if you can't necessarily afford money, that you can afford time, and go down there and sit with them and show your solidarity. We would certainly appreciate that. Hopefully that will be a good way that you can contribute. So we are waiting for a couple more guests to jump on, and we do have some lined up soon. I do want to say that coming out of this, the reason why we kind of fast-tracked this for this evening was mostly due to the fact that, like you saw earlier this week, the main camp, the main site that they had, and it was more than a camp. It was, the first day I went down there, there was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 tents down there. There was, and when I say tents, I mean like tents that people were like all weather, all season tents that people were sleeping in. There was a kind of a pavilion style food area, which was a giant tent, which people could go and get drinks and food. There was a medical tent, and there was always medical staff on site. That was everything that was set up with the idea that they were going to go into a long-standing occupation at that site. And admittedly, they were given notices that they had to take it all down, mostly because the city has specific bylaws against encampments and people sleeping on public property. And we saw this very recently happening out at First Ontario Centre, formerly Cops Coliseum, where a group that was out there for a long period of time basically had all of their stuff taken apart. And you can see in some of the pictures now, I know a lot of the focus of the camera is on the police and the bylaw officers, but you can see the scale that they had with regards to the camp being set up. There was a lot of things there that people could use. They had generators, they had lights. They were in it there for the long haul, peacefully there for the long haul, to try and make a point, to try and say, this is what's important to us. This is the dedication that we are willing to show. And you can see all of these different stations, places that people can, like I say, they had, before they all geared up, they made sure that they were making sure that everybody was going to be have a level of comfort if they were there. And so it was an impressive site. It was better equipped than almost any other site that I have ever seen in terms of an outside rallying point where people could get together and where people could do a protest or do a picket line or whatever it was. So, I mean, oftentimes on a picket line, you'll have a small tent, you'll have coffee, and you'll have donuts, and that's it. It was far more well thought out and equipped than that. I do want to give some kudos, like I did off the top, but I do want to mention the fact that the longstanding tradition that not only Labor Council in Hamilton, but Labor across the country is starting to build now with Defund the Police, but also standing in solidarity with working class people who are in poverty, working class people who are part of marginalized communities, who are part of racialized communities. That we need to realize that one of those things that transcends a lot of the communities that we talk about and a lot of the coalition partners that we have is class. And that most of us that are listening to this today, and most of your neighbors and almost everyone you talk to, are working class people. And when politicians trying to divide us up among middle class and lower class and poverty class and all that stuff, it becomes a problem. I can see we have Sharoni jumping on. Sharoni, thanks for jumping on. I'm wondering if you can quickly introduce yourself, because I didn't have the opportunity to, so I'll let you quickly introduce yourself before we have a quick conversation.
Yeah, happy to. My name is Sharoni Mitra. I'm the president of QP 3906, which is a local that represents contract academic workers at McMaster University. I'm also a student myself in labor studies, doing the master's degree at Mac.
Perfect. Now, before we get into some of the stuff that's happening at City Hall right now, when we got the demands from Defund HPS back, I think in the spring, it's when they first came out and I first saw them. I wouldn't mind getting your perspective, because there was some specific demands in there with regards to things that were happening on campus as well. And I'm sure you've got a box seat view as to some of those issues. Can you maybe fill us in on some of the history that happened on campus with regards to, we wouldn't even necessarily say the Hamilton Police Service, but certainly legacy of the Hamilton Police Service anyway?
Yeah, that's right. I'm glad you brought that up. So McMaster's head of campus security, Mr. Glenn DeClaire, is a former HBS chief, I believe. I used to work for, the Hamilton Police Service. He's literally been called out by like the Ontario Human Rights Commission for his racial profiling policies and various egregious ways of being a cop. And even with the wave of massive like social movements that happened this spring, including organizing in our city, McMaster hasn't done much to address the collective call to have that guy fired. So we're still organizing around that. Thankfully, there's been a lot of campus groups who are pro removing DeCare and have proposed really like meaningful and thoughtful policy alternatives on how to create a safe, like an actually safe campus, and not one that is just run in a punitive way. We also have special constables at MAC. We'd like to see those removed, and we're calling for data to be collected as well on who gets ticketed, who gets followed, who's interacting with these campus cops, which McMaster conveniently says they don't have the data on hand. So it's been months long. I've only been at MAC for a year myself, and I know it's been like several years of folks trying to agitate around that.
So from some of what you've heard, I know that when I went to McMaster, and that was too many years ago at this point, what has the relationship been like from what you've heard with off-campus people? Because we always have a lot of people in residence off campus, not in residence, living in private houses, sometimes many to a household. I'm sure there's got to be a strained relationship with some of those off-campus people in police as well, and specifically in that case, the Hamilton Police Service, not just the campus.
Right. Oh, like McMaster's community more widely, whether
yes.
or not people. Yeah, for sure. Two sides of the same coin. I think anyone with principles, or if you're racialized, or a minority in any other means, like your relationship with policing is very different than the image of policing that's pushed by the cops. I think for like students who are, you're studying social science, you're learning how to be critical about the world, and you can easily start debunking a lot of myths around cops. So certainly for our local, we see it as like an issue to target McMaster with, but it's actually just a Hamilton-wide problem that we want to support, if that makes sense.
Sure. So officially now, I'm assuming that your local has gotten behind and endorsed most of the demands that are involved with the movement that's happening at City Hall right now?
Yeah, for sure. We're 100% on board. Very proud and inspired to see this coalition that's coming out of Defund HPS, including all the work they did this summer associated with the cops out of the school board. Like that was such an amazing organizing event to witness, like right on the streets in front of City Hall. Where we're out there supporting in a lot of ways. We want to see members out on the streets if they're able to do that, offering food and donations, working on like one-on-one conversations. I think that's an important element as well. If you're not able to go out, I'm sure like everyone knows someone in their life who's maybe on the fence about policing still, and you could take some time to educate your peers. And yeah, just unequivocally, we stand by our comrades, these young racialized organizers who are really putting themselves on the line for like the well-being of everyone in Hamilton.
Are you finding that you've had any, and you might not have it on your executive. I mean, I've noticed on Labor Council that it's sometimes had, you don't see the pushback on your executive, but you sometimes maybe down the chain and within Facebook friends, even within Labor friends, you know, I've seen Labor people who say, well, you know, the police are workers too, and you know we have to make sure that we're protecting their rights as workers. Have you run into any of that, or am I just optimistic in thinking that because you're from a younger demographic than I am, that you might not be facing those questions as much?
Yeah, thankfully our membership can be very bold and progressive. Like I'm so thrilled to be part of a local like that. But yeah, people come from different perspectives, different walks of life. Who even knows like the media that they're consuming and the sort of intellectual environments are in. But yeah, we can have some tough conversations in GMMs. One example that comes to mind is for the campus policing proposal that was discussed earlier this summer. We had to really, you know, explain pretty clearly, like, hey, we got to take the lead of Black students who've crafted this policy, and like, if your relationship with the police isn't averse, or if you're someone who feels safe by cops, then you got to like step back, and it's not your place to, you know, pardon the pun, like police other people's visions of a safer community. So there's a bit of that. I think Labor, yeah, still stands to do a lot of work on educating around like how the police's interests aren't the same as working class interests, right? So we sympathize with cops as workers, but if they protect property or if they protect profit over people, if they're killing racialized workers and other members of our communities, you know, clearly their work is not in line with like working class interests.
So this is something where has your local done anything in terms of either donations or other support? I know that I've seen some of your members out on the site, which is great. And the only reason I'm asking is because I'm asking because I'm hoping that I can encourage other locals to do the same. And so I'm wondering if I can set up the equivalent of a challenge where they hear if 3906 did this, then maybe we can do this as well.
Totally. Yeah. I'd love to see other locals show us up. Yeah, happy to say we've had a bit of a flying picket going out over the past week and a half. I've been part of that. And it's actually just felt really good, despite like the intensity and like, you know, the violence that's going down. It also feels really good to be on site, and I encourage folks to go out for that because there's a strong sense of community and joy through all this as well. It's the first time I'd felt that in a long time, especially with the pandemic, like actually seeing folks out there like physically safely distanced and all, you know, like breaking bread together and talking about the communities we want to see. So there's the flying tickets. We're donating money where we can. In the past too, we've like offered funds for some of like the logistical action supports that Defund HBS has called for. So yeah, that's kind of the main thing.
I was actually just talking about that earlier as I was first starting up, that the experience that I had, the kind of the solidarity and the dedication and all of that, the inspiration that I felt when I walked up to when I drove up to 1492 Landback Lane over the summer and saw that level of commitment, dedication, that long-term perseverance, the idea that we're going to stay here. And then I never thought that I would see it so quickly back in Hamilton, but I'm seeing that reflected in the commitment and dedication down there. And as a labor person, I certainly walk away every time I walk away from that site down at City Hall, I'm either way more pissed off than I should be, or I'm way more in awe and inspired than I expected to be. And I think that there's something that certainly can be said for If you're a labor person who hasn't, maybe in the past you've been on strike or something like that, or you've been on a picket line, or you've been to protest, and you felt that level of solidarity, it's something that you might be missing in your life, especially during a time like this, during a pandemic. It's something that certainly is, let's just call it nourishing during a time when we have to be very careful about places that we can go out to and places that, involvement that we can have. But I mean, if you go out to City Hall at any given time, there's probably going to be less than 25 people out there, and you're probably everyone's wearing a mask, and you're going to be safe, but you still get that sense of commitment. I'm wondering what if your takeaway is similar to that, or if you've had members reflect on that to you in terms of, I don't know how many members you actually have locally right now. I mean, I don't know if most of your members are still local, or if they're doing some remote teaching as well. But I'm wondering if you've heard back any messages on that from people who might not have experienced something like that before.
Yeah, totally. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I think undeniably there's a very energizing feel at that sit-in, and a reminder of just how well collective power and defiance works, and the fact that to get progress in this world, you got to make demands, right? We got to grab that money back from the rich. And I wish things could just go more conversationally, but it does have to be a bit more of an adversarial action. And it was nice to hear, from the Flying Squad folks, everyone being reminded of being out there on the ground, in whether in your unofficial picket line or the equivalent for defund. It always kind of boils down to that kind of action. And I think the other thing that a lot of us were thinking about too is that power of community and collective connection is a much more sustainable and meaningful form of power compared to the coercive and fear-based tactics or power that cops put up, right? Which is scary for sure, and violent, but it's what's that chant? Well, all the chants that basically say the people are going to win over time. We have the numbers, and we have the fight and the sort of generous spirit on our side. And I think that meant a lot to our members to see that after this long frickin' year. Yeah.
What do you say when you run into friends, acquaintances, people maybe you've known for a while, and they're people who they hear defund and they hear abolish and they throw their arms up and they get scared? I think we all have our own narratives and our own lenses and experience that we bring to those conversations. What is maybe one of the ways or a couple of the ways that you try and explain to them why this isn't a scary thing?
Yeah, it's tricky, especially as the years go on, when those words become the norm for me, and I meet someone who is, as you said, scared about words like abolish. Such a beautiful word otherwise. I kind of got to put my organizing hat on, my patience and empathy hat, and strategically think about how to connect with someone like that. And I think sometimes coming from the left, you get frustrated or scared yourself of people with views that don't align with yours. But trying to just show them the commonality, and also maybe point to them hey, you can fact check a lot of these claims and they are true, right? So it's not just rhetoric. It's not just bold sounding phrases that we like chanting for fun. But that's a big question. Yeah, how do you hopefully plant seeds with people that over time, maybe not in your one conversation with them, but through a series of experiences, might slowly open their eyes. And the other thing too, I assume a lot of folks have thought about this, is you don't have to agree with the protest tactics, although it's fully peaceful protest, democratic expression. And we should really find it unacceptable that the pandemic's being used as an excuse to suppress that protest, as well as to silence racialized youth and unhoused folks. Anyway, sorry, what was my main point here? Oh, even if you disagree with those protest tactics, can't you take some time though to think if you agree with the issue at hand, which is, man, we have a housing crisis in a wealthy country that has so many resources that need to be distributed, right, or redistributed. And if you can't wrap your mind around not liking the protests, then there's probably something deeper too that's going on with you. For maybe you don't like it when Black folks are protesting or when unhoused folks are protesting. Yeah.
Before I ask you a couple more questions, I just want to make sure that I remind everybody, donate to the Defundraiser, e-transfer to info@defundhps.com, and info@defundhps.com. If you've never done an e-transfer before, trust me, email them at info@defundhps.com, and they will help you and find a way that you can make a donation, whatever that is. And like I said earlier, if that's sleeping bags, if that's blankets, if that's a warm meal, if that's maybe a propane heater that you've had lying around from that you used to use when you were camping 5 or 6 years ago and you're not going to use anymore, please do that. And pledge volunteer time. If you go to our link, hdlc.ca/friendraiser, and you're willing to commit to a certain amount of hours over the next week, so that they are not feeling like nobody's listening. Like I mentioned earlier, having people come out and share those experiences, share those conversations with you is great. So even if you're able to go out for an hour or two over the next week, I know that they certainly appreciate everybody who comes down there. So I always, I'm sorry to interrupt the conversation, but I always try and get that in every 10 or 15 minutes as much as possible. I'm curious, so you said this was your first year at Mac. So are you not originally from Hamilton?
No, I'm from New Brunswick. Thank you for asking.
Okay.
I try to plug it in at every opportunity.
Okay. So how, I don't know the policing situation in anywhere specifically in New Brunswick, but what was the culture like when you walked in a year ago? And because we were right in the midst of all of this then, with regards to some of the stuff that happened at Pride, is it something that upon first blanch was kind of shocking to you and you thought, what have I walked into in terms of a city? Or is it something where you view it as more of a challenge at this point because you've had that background in labor studies and that background in education where you've started to question those things?
Yeah, a bit of both. So I was in Toronto for a few years before moving to Hamilton. Had heard so many comments about Hamilton as well as like this underdog or scary city. So then I was pretty interested because New Brunswick has, some parallel reputational qualities. But yeah, once I got here, I was pretty pleasantly surprised to see how many organizers there are across the political left, whether it's anarchists or labor folks and, all the cross in between. When I heard about the Pride incident, I was really, really what the heck's going on here? And as I get to know more and more folks in Hamilton, that's what makes me see it as a challenge, right? There are people here who are so dedicated to fighting that fight. And if it wasn't for that, I think I'd worry that we're just on the Gotham City path of crony mayors and, cops in hand or whatever. But yeah, the dedication and depth of politics here is really cool. So as a labor studies student in that sense, there's so many things outside my department that have taught me the things I need to know as someone who's trying to, be in the labor movement longer term.
Is there anything, as we're wrapping up here, is there anything that labor, other unions, other union locals, other allies can do to help with some of the demands that were campus-based demands, kind of getting back to where we started? Is there any pressure that can be exerted, or is that culture at McMaster more of a closed community where it really doesn't matter what the outside says? Or is there an impact that can be had? And I'm not necessarily speaking of during a pandemic time either, because I mean, who knows what we can do at that point. But are there pressure points that I guess the outside working class people and comrades in Hamilton can do?
Totally. That outside pressure and community pressure absolutely matters for McMaster's decision makings. I think their public relations and public image is a key point to target. So I'd encourage folks, even just to write into the university or comment on their social media. The more public, the better. Calling them out on their hypocrisy and pressuring them to meaningfully do something that makes their campus safer for racialized and queer folks, right? Every institution had their statement out after the spring. Nicely worded, flowery language, throwing out anti-racism and abolish the police and stuff. But it's always a little bit later down the road if you see, did they actually move money and resources? Did they answer to community demands or not? And unfortunately, we're not seeing that at MAC. So, anyone who wants to write in or write an opinion piece and things like that, I'd encourage you to do so. And just to consider McMaster as part of the Hamilton policing question as well. It's not separate.
Sure. I just want to say, I think it's fantastic, the activism that your local has shown. And I know that you're fairly new to the president's role, but for many years we've been so happy to work with 3906 with the Labor Council, and I know that this is one of those things where we very quickly saw eye to eye on as we saw this this movement come forward. So thanks so much for giving us your time on a Friday evening.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Sharoni.
Totally. Thanks, Anthony.
Take care, comrade. Remember, everybody, donate to info@defundhps.com by e-transfer, and pledge your volunteer time at hdlc.ca/fundraiser. We immediately are going to jump to another guest who's going to come on and talk a little bit about one of the main things that one of the main reasons why this was happening. And when we were talking about defund HPS, we were talking about a two-sided aspect to it. We weren't just talking about defunding, but we were trying to target where the money was going to go. And so I believe we have Mike on the line from Acorn Hamilton. Mike, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Good to have you on. We've got a nice picture of a tiger of you on the screen, so that's just fine.
Okay, let me just change that.
Oh, you got your camera going? That's great. I didn't know whether you didn't have a camera going or not, but that's awesome. Hopefully you're doing well. Thanks for spending some time with us tonight.
No, thank you for the invitation.
So one of the reasons that we reached out and we wanted to hear from somebody from Acorn. First of all, Acorn and Labor Council have fostered a really solid relationship over the past couple of years, and we like to support each other whenever we can. But we noticed right away that while there are defund the police movements that are happening all over the place right now, one of the unique things that was happening with this one is the specific target was with regards to defund the police and let's provide more housing. And with Acorn, I know first experience, you've got probably a lot of stories that you've heard and a lot of stories that you've told with regards to housing in this city and with regards to tenants' rights in this city. I'm wondering if you can talk about how dire the situation is right now, and maybe just set the stage how dire it is right now, and especially with COVID going on, what some people are going through. Because I've noticed there's some actions that have been happening with regards to Acorn, especially even over the past few days.
Right. Well, let me just start by introducing myself. And I'm Michael Lopez from Acorn's East End chapter. So for people who don't know and would like to know what is Acorn, Acorn is a membership organization made up of low and moderate income people fighting for change. We have been active since 2004 and have 24 chapters in 9 cities across Canada. With 140,000 members, our campaigns are focused on social and economic justice. In Hamilton, we have been focused on getting the city of Hamilton to protect tenants and on evictions and substandard housing. And we signed to the defund HPS demand in June. And now to your question, yeah, the situation is dire. I mean, just in Hamilton alone, from 2018 to 2019, we saw like a 24% increase in rent. I mean, it just skyrocketed. So just to put that in perspective, just get my notes here. You'd have to work 54 hours, on minimum wage just to afford that. We've seen our members, been right and evicted just because they can't handle bed bugs anymore. Stories of just landlords, have poor practices, intimidation, even if they pay, so it is quite dire. I mean, the situation and all these economic issues go hand in hand, right? From defunding the police and putting more funds into social housing, right?
At this point, I mean, it seems like with some of the very real stories of people, some of the encampments that have been out on the streets over the past 4 or 5 months, I mean, you're seeing the impact that the pandemic is having on some people. When people lose their jobs and they're in low income jobs to begin with, and rents are going up even under the pandemic, I notice how a lot of the federal relief that comes in tends to go to landlords as opposed to going to people who are actually renting. And that's a tough thing. When all of this is coming down at the same time, I know that you might not be able to answer this, but I would think that it has to be even worse than it looks. Like, how much is it going to take? Like, I know that the mayor came on as a response to, I think, one of the radio shows a couple of weeks ago and said, we've got this plan for $5 million over the next 5 years for affordable housing. There are what are the stats? Like 3,000 people who are on the waiting list right now for affordable housing in Hamilton?
Yeah. It is that high. I mean, the situation is really, really dire. I mean, like, there's no way of sugarcoating it. The next social housing in the next 5 years, when they kind of need it now. Just anybody who walked around Ferguson Street can just attest to that. Walking down Gage Park, is I was born and raised in Hamilton, so it's weird going down Gage Park and then see people tent out there. I've never seen that in my life. 45% of renters are living in unaffordable housing, meaning that they're spending 30% of their income on rent, and 20% of renters live in deeply unaffordable homes. I mean, this is just not sustainable.
And I remember a time too, and I mean, I've lived in Hamilton my entire life as well. And, I remember as a youngster, the concept of, it used to be that one parent with a full-time job could put a down payment on a house, make mortgage payments, buy a car, pay for a kid's education,
right,
all with one salary. That used to be kind of the metric, is that people could get all that done as soon as they wanted to. And if they got the job, if they got the career, then they were secure. You've probably seen that happen as well. How much does this tie into the concept of, and where does Acorn stand on the things like living wage and like basic income, and how much would that maybe help to impact? I mean, understandably, the rents are even too high for basic income and probably too high for living wage right now. But are those things that Acorn sees as necessary steps that need to be taken, not just municipally, but provincially and federally as well?
Oh, absolutely. And it has to be a comprehensive approach. I mean, livable wage, but if you still have the same landlord practices that we have right now, it just doesn't seem like it's going to be very viable. The livable wage will soon be evaporated by that. And if you have a universal basic income, again, it's a great idea, but it needs to be supported by other things. It's like social housing. There will be people who can't afford rent, and there's always people who won't be able to. But social housing is a necessary mechanism so that livable wages and basic income work as intended. Right? So it's all part of the same ecosystem.
It's and I'm guessing, and I know that some of the areas that right now where there's low income housing, that oftentimes, like you say, there's rent evictions happening and things like that. We often look at the idea of food security as being a major issue as well. Not only in terms of just food security about being able to afford it, but in some cases we have food deserts in area of this city, whereby somebody who doesn't have a car, and you can barely travel on a bus during the pandemic, or at least earlier in the pandemic, how do you even get to some places? Like, there's areas of the city where you're 12, 15, 20 blocks away from the nearest supermarket.
Exactly. And then the winter's coming, and how do you do that in the winter? Right? It's just, again, the change that needs to, housing is such an integral part of a community. And when people can't afford to live or afford to pay for it, all this stuff just kind of goes hand in hand. Like, for example, you have people living in Toronto or Mississauga, and they have their unaffordable conditions as well. Well, they're going to do what normal working people do. They're going to try and reduce their costs, and they're going to try to, make ends meet with what they have. And so they're going to migrate over here, which is absolutely, necessary for them. But then, with these landlords and the rent practices that we have, it creates like a gold rush for them, which puts the pressure and incentivizes them to remove low-income people. And these, we're talking about the most vulnerable people, right? in society, and then they get pushed out to the margins. And then through that, you know, if they'll can find themselves in a food desert because now they're further away than where they were to the grocery store. So it's all interconnected, and that those social relationships are really important.
It's one of the things that we definitely notice at the Labor Council level. I mean, one of the things that we've been pushing over the past several years is living wage. And obviously that's an important step. And that's why we are coalition partners, and we find great allies within coalitions. I mean, when Labor Council has come and they ask us about a housing issue, one of the first things we do is we call up Acorn. And when it's a food security issue, we will call up another group. And having those relationships is important because, like you say, it's too tough for one group to do all of it. Acorn does a great job on focusing on the housing of it, but on the housing side of it. But like we say, we've got these young activists who are out in front of City Hall right now. And I don't know if you've had the opportunity to get down to the site or not, but has Acorn been organizing in any numbers in any way to try and get down there with regards to showing support, or is that just tough right now with some of the issues that are going on with transportation?
Well, I can't speak for all of Acorn. I can only speak for myself, really. But from my interactions with the members, that yes, we've had people who have gone there, with other people who can't. Because of transportation issues and the like. I personally have not, but we're definitely involved in that struggle, and we're definitely supportive of it. As far as, you know, I can speak for myself.
When you see this conversation about defunding the police going hand in hand with housing, and that is the major focus, because there's a lot of people that when they talk about defunding the police, they talk about a whole bunch of other things. They talk about social services. They talk about the fact that this major focus right now is on housing. Has to at least kind of, I would imagine, start to generate conversation that it's sometimes tough. I mean, I would have to imagine that it's tough to get any kind of conversations happening among people who don't have housing issues to talk about housing. It's the last thing they want to talk about. Is this at the very least helping to have some of those conversations starting, even though it's not necessarily like it's Acorn who's doing the defund the police, but now at least you get to talk about the housing needs in this city?
Exactly. I mean, the thing about the slogan is that it gets the conversation going, right? And then it tie into housing, then you can start going into other conversations of violence and where that comes from, and alienation and the detrimental effects that happens. And defund the police now takes a different form, takes this form of, you know, offloading, like some things that they shouldn't. We are, by funding the police the way we are, I guess, allowing negative behavior from profiteering off people, because then it creates the social conditions that lead to violence, and then later justifies the putting more funds into police. And to tie it to housing is really, really important to show how that these things are work together. That by you create safe communities by having good housing, that people can live a life of dignity with a livable wage. And then the question of violence doesn't become such an issue at that point. And so it doesn't become this self-fulfilling prophecy that now we need to. And so with this, there's an opportunity to talk with people who, you know, even within your own family or whatnot, that may not understand it, but then they understand the need for housing, and they understand how this stuff can materialize in negative ways if that is not addressed. So I see it as a positive, personally speaking. Again, I cannot speak for the whole organization. We're a big organization.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Michael, thank you so much for your time. I can't think of a better way to wrap it up. And I know that certainly the relationship between Acorn and Labor Council has been strong over the past few years, that we tend to get each out and support each other. And I think we're all realizing the need right now that our coalitions, as broad as they are, they need to even get bigger. The only way that we're going to affect change in this city is to find all of the different groups that have all the things in common that we do, and we need to join together, because whether it's during election time or whether it's just a time like this where we're pushing for a big ask and a big push, we definitely need the solidarity of everyone else. So thanks for giving up some of your time on a Friday night. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I'll just end with this. It's always good to remember, just regardless of the conversations you have, just always be kind and compassionate to individuals and just be ruthless to institutions.
Thanks very much, brother. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you. This is our Defundraiser at Hamilton District Labor Council. We would ask you to donate to info@defundhps.com. And please feel free to pledge some volunteer time at hdlc.ca/friendraiser. Sometimes those hours that you spend on site can be just as valuable as some money that you could donate as well. So we encourage you to do that. We are ready to jump to our next guest. We had a couple of gaps earlier on in the live stream, but we've got people who are ready to jump in right now, and we certainly appreciate that as much as possible. So hopefully we're going to get some people jumping on right now. And it looks like we have Sarah Jama jumping on right now. Sarah, how are you, sister?
I'm okay. Sorry about my fuzzy camera. I dropped it multiple times.
That's just fine. I appreciate you finding a few minutes because I know that you're busy. We had a great talk with Greg earlier, near off the top, and he filled us in on a lot of the stuff that's been going on. How have things been just over the past couple days? I know that people have been following, but I would say, we've had a couple benchmark moments over the past couple of weeks with regards to especially how the city has reacted. How do you? I'm more concerned about the people who you have and the comrades that you have on the ground. How are you doing over the last couple of days in going through some of the trials and turmoils that you've been going through?
We're okay. We've been getting a lot of community support, so that's been really uplifting. I'm not gonna lie, we're cold and we're tired, but it's humbling to remember that like being outside is what everybody, like a lot of people's experiences are every single day, and so that's what's keeping us out there. Yeah, it's been a bit rough, but also I'm grateful for all the support and the ways in which Hamilton has shown up to support this cause.
Can you go back a little bit and talk to me when we first came out late on the first night that you had the camp set up there? You mentioned to me that this had been in the works for a while. Can you kind of tell me the genesis of what was behind this and some of the planning that went into it? And I'm not saying this necessarily from, I don't want to necessarily create a playbook for people, but that's not a bad thing as well. But I want to show people just how much, when I walked onto the site the first time, you had perhaps the best organized and geared up site that I have ever seen for something like this. And so I wonder if you'd spend a couple minutes just telling us kind of what went into that.
Yeah, we've been thinking about it for a while. It started kind of after the first time we witnessed an encampment being torn down, which was at Ferguson and First Ontario Center. How we kind of got to this point, though, is like a lot of us had been the people behind caremongering, the food delivery system in Hamilton when COVID first hit and everything shut down. So we've been like busy trying to feed thousands of Hamiltonians over the course of like the last 8 months repeatedly, and putting out fires like that. And then we got asked to be roped into more encampment support stuff. We'd begun delivering food to people in these encampments, and then we got in touch with Keeping Six because they share our base at the New Vision Church where we do caremongering stuff. And they asked for legal observers to be present at the teardowns of Ferguson and First Ontario Center encampments. And the teardowns were just brutal. We couldn't bring ourselves to just do legal observing. Like a lot of us were in the middle of like stopping police from, escalating situations with houses.
Oh, you muted for a second.
Sorry, hello?
Yeah, no, it's okay. You're back.
Sorry, I randomly muted. Yeah, a lot of us were witnessing in the rain, like the brutality in terms of like bylaw workers city workers and police who were working together to force houseless people out of public space. And then realizing after those two teardowns, more encampments actually started to pop up. So now there are over 28 encampments of houseless people across Hamilton, which is the most that we've ever had of houseless people. And a lot of people are disabled, have disabilities are struggling with chronic illnesses, invisible disabilities, and have nowhere else to go. The city lied and said they have hotels for people and shelters, but the women's shelters are completely full and have been full for years. So that's not new. And the men's shelters are run like in prison level conditions. We've had people say like, the managers there are problematic. They consistently kick people out. There's not a lot of supports around mental health stuff. The hotels, there's also a high turnover rate because a hotel is not a home and there's no services there either. So people would much prefer to be like in their own space, and sometimes that looks like a tent. So that's kind of what inspired this action, talking about raising the question of why are poor people being criminalized in our city. Hamilton has the largest density of people with disabilities in the entire province. And what we're witnessing is like the cruelty, and like the cruelty in the ways in which disabled people are being treated in some of the hardest conditions we face in our lifetime.
You randomly muted again.
Sorry,
I'll take this. I'll take this up. Okay.
Pandemic. Sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay. When you muted there, I didn't know if you'd spot it right away. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just remind people, please donate. This is my donation reminder, info@defundhps.com. If you're watching the live stream, please donate by e-transfer to there or any other way that you can. And Sarah, I know that we've got a couple of your comrades who've jumped onto the call as well. So we'll have a bit of a group chat here right now, if you don't mind. So we'll bring in, we've got Roa who's joining us as well. So that's fantastic. If you can volunteer time, go to hdlc.ca/friendraiser. Because I know being down there a couple of times late at night, sometimes the numbers get thin, and sometimes being able to have a conversation with somebody new, even though it's cold outside, can be a great way to pass the time, especially if it's somebody that you don't know. So that's one way to do it. And you mentioned earlier that you've been getting support. Do you find that people are still getting over that hurdle of defund, abolish, and maybe I know I see that Roa's audio is connecting as we go through, but maybe as her audio is coming in, you can talk about what are some of the arguments that you're telling people with regards to why it's not a fearful thing, why the word defund shouldn't be feared. I'm trying to ask as many people as I can that tonight, because I know that sometimes when people hear just that right turn of phrase that they can tell the next person, they think that makes sense to me now, that will make sense to this person. So I'm wondering what are a couple of the catchways that you have done that when somebody comes up and says, defund, abolish, all these things are ridiculous. How can we do that? It's just going to be chaos in the streets. What are your general responses to that to try and kind of turn people around a little bit?
I mean, the police make $171 million in their budget, and they have a surplus, and they were asking for an increase. And their budget is the largest public service related budget in Hamilton out of all the other services, and the only service to actually keep a surplus, right? I think that it doesn't make sense to invest this much into police when we know that crime overall in Hamilton and across Canada has been going down. It's not, I don't think it's a priority. The priority is making sure that people have, sorry, one sec.
No, it's okay. Understandably, we've got action happening down near City Hall as well, and so with things constantly on the go, there's going to be interruptions.
Sorry, somebody just walked in. Yeah, I think also police are not preventative. We know that for a fact. They're usually called after a crime has been committed. It makes much more sense to invest to make sure that people have places to be, versus what we see where police in droves are sent to tear down encampments, to tear down lives and to cause harm. I think that oftentimes we think that police having their budget reduced will mean that crime will increase, but it really just means that we'll have less officers making $130,000 a year, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. And for all the people who are worried about the term defunding, I would ask them to consider all the other things that have been defunded over the course of the last decade, right? So we've seen social assistance be defunded. We've seen access to public healthcare be defunded, in the sense that we're moving slowly toward privatization, looking at like the fact that even injured workers can't access proper healthcare, right? And things like that. policing itself doesn't really solve anything, and we've seen that community has ways to support each other. And that's what we were trying to show by holding space for ourselves in front of City Hall and also houseless people, that we can take care of each other and we don't actually need police presence. Men that are armed showing up with guns don't really solve much. There are other ways to support community members, Hamiltonians, people with disabilities in our community. I'll let Roa talk now.
Ro, I noticed that you're connected with your audio. I know you're on mute right now, but I'm wondering if we can get some, thanks for joining us, by the way. I'm wondering if we can get maybe some reflections from you on your experiences over the past couple of weeks in participating with this action that has gone on. Nice.
I'm so sorry. Do you mind repeating that for me one more time?
Yeah, no problem. I was just wondering, Sarah's been giving us a bit of the background, but I'm wondering if you can give maybe some of your personal perspective on kind of your experiences and some of your takeaways from the first couple of weeks that you've gone through this. Obviously, there's been a couple of monumental moments, but I'm sure that there's been some positives as well as some of the negatives that you've experienced as well.
Yes, for sure. So from day one, it was, I guess I wasn't expecting to be seeing as much as I did see in terms of the amount of help that people needed. And we knew that people needed help and people needed support, even through like different food programs and caremongering and different things that are happening in the city. I knew that people needed support, but I didn't know that if we set up in that way that so many people would need support and so many people would come through and be in real need of things like tents, because the shelter system is truly failing them. And then I also didn't know how much the community would pull through in different ways. Like, people in the city do want to support unhoused people. That's demonstrated by the fact that when we set up a food tent, all that food comes through from the community, and people want to support and people want to give and they don't want to see their neighbors die in the cold, right? It is just the city that is failing them. So I knew there was a lot of good in people, but I guess I didn't expect to see it the way that I did. And then it was really heartbreaking the day that everything got torn down. And just thinking about some of the people that we met, some of whom are still outside with us, but some people who got truly displaced. And it was the first snow and we don't know what happened to them or where they are or any of that. And if anything, it's strengthened my resolve to want to do something, push harder, do something, because it's not fair that the city's not doing something and then they're stopping us from doing something too. I don't know if that answers your question. I've been very sleep deprived. So if you need any clarifications, definitely ask.
It definitely does. I was mentioning we had Sharoni Mitra on about a half an hour ago from QP 3906, who's the president of QP 3906. And I was mentioning to her that that some of the inspiration, the anger, the solidarity, the dedication that I felt earlier this summer in going up to 1492 Landback Lane, I never thought that I would feel in this city so quickly. But the first time I went down to City Hall a couple of weeks ago, that kind of came rushing back. And every time I go down and visit you, all of you down at City Hall, I feel either incredibly inspired, incredibly full of solidarity, or way more pissed off than I should be. And so I'm wondering what reactions maybe you're surprised about that you're getting from people down there. Obviously, you've mentioned that you've got a lot of people coming down with regards to solidarity. Have you had to face any troublemakers that have been down there as well, or for the most part, have they stayed away? And I don't mind which one of you answers this, by the way. I can kind of open it up to either of you.
There's definitely always troublemakers. There's white supremacists who walk by and say, "Oh, so who's going to defend you when people like me come by?" That was my experience today that I caught on video. It was not a good time. But you have people who come by and are like, "I don't support what you're doing. You've made a massive city hall." There's those kind of angry reactions. And then tenfold, there's the people who come through and are like, "This is incredible. What y'all are doing is incredible. We wish we had the courage to push through. And now that there's a group to push through with, we have developed the courage to push through." So it's been just two sides of it, where you get the haters and then there's a lot of community support. And with all of that love pouring through, it's really hard to focus on like the one white supremacist who comes by and is like, "Oh, be scared of me," you know?
Yeah. Sarah, what do you need now as we're trying to get people to donate? What we're telling some people is if they don't have cash, they can certainly volunteer their time. But other than that, I've mentioned a few times, because I know I spoke to you a couple nights ago, sleeping bags, blankets, what other things are in high need right now on site?
The city took our tents away, but we're still giving them out to people. Like, we're still being visited by like a ton of houseless people who need them. So tents are always good. Bodies on the ground, because it can get scary at nighttime with the cops patrolling. So that always helps. And anybody who's like a performer or an artist who wants to do a workshop during the day, we've done a ton of cool stuff already. Always feel free to just DM us so we can schedule you in.
That's great.
Roa,
And
any thoughts?
yeah, Roa, anything to add that you've seen?
I would say things that are needed the most are some warming items. So whether that's the little propane heaters, the little buddy ones, we've given away as many of those as we can, because people come by and like, we're staying, but like they also just need them for their actual life, right? So a lot of those, the little green propane things that you get. And also hand warmers, like the kinds that people shake and put in their pockets and stuff to stay warm. I know that a lot of unhoused people are putting those in their sleeping bags as well. I certainly did when I was out in my tent, to keep warm, because the concrete is incredibly cold and sucks the body heat right out of you. But just warming items. We're actually really good on like hats and scarves. We always need more mitts though, more socks. Can never have enough good quality wool socks for folks.
Perfect. As we kind of wrap up here, because we have other people who are jumping on in a minute. First of all, I want to thank you both for taking the time. I know it's a bit of a hike to get where you are, to jump on a call like this from City Hall. So I do appreciate you doing that. If there's and I'll let you each answer this final one. If there's a message that you could get out there to either allies, potential allies, people of Hamilton, that you want them to take away over the next couple days, because everyone has said on site, this is a long haul. This isn't something that's going to be ending anytime soon. If there's one message that you want them to take away with them, what would that message be?
I think I would. Oh, you go ahead.
Go for it.
I think I would say like imagine the impossible. Like, I've heard from almost every level of government that like, oh, it's not our problem. Like, this other level of government is supposed to put this much money into this thing, and people keep offloading whose fault it is over and over and over again. But there are solutions available, and it's just going to take courage. So don't believe people when they say that this isn't the right way to make change. We've all done things in the acceptable, respectable way before. All of us who are on the ground right now have been like organizing and doing community work for years in our city. We're not strangers to any of you. We know how to delegate. We know how to write letters. And so far, that's not fixing the issue. And a lot of unhoused people are on track to die this winter. And so we're saying, imagine the impossible. Fight with us. Do what you think makes you uncomfortable, because at the end of the day, it's going to take being uncomfortable to push for change. And we need numbers out there, and we need that support. So don't let anyone tell you that what we're doing is too irrational or too radical, because it's not. Because we know that public pressure is what forces people in positions of power to do the right thing.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Sarah. Roa, how about you?
I just want everyone to know that, yeah, each individual person can be their own carrier of courage. Like, you have the courage to gather and step out, and there are going to be other people there with you, but don't discount yourself from the people who have the courage to do the work. You too are a holder of courage, a carrier of courage, and you can wield that to advocate for people and to hold people to account.
Thank both of you so much. Like I say, I will hopefully be down at the site at least once or twice this weekend. And whether I come away way more angry than I should or way more inspired than I should, I think it's both sides are a positive thing, and both sides will help lead to the change that I think we're all looking for. And I want to thank you both for your dedication and the effort that you've put into this. And I hope that we can inspire a lot more allies to come out and to join over the next little while. Thank you both for your time tonight, and solidarity to both of you. I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just another quick donation call. Donate by e-transferring to info@defundhps.com. If you've never done an e-transfer before, this is a good time to do it, and pledge your volunteer time at hdlc.ca/friendraiser. Well, another great friend of Labor Council over the past few years has joined us on the call. I want to welcome Hamilton Centre MP Matthew Green, who I dare say, Matthew, we've probably been on the same side of quite a few battles over the past 5 years or so. This is a big one, and this is one that a lot of people need to get together, and we need a radical amount of people to come together to try and get this to happen. This isn't going to be something where it's going to be 25 or 100 people. We need a groundswell behind this. And what are some of your early reactions on how it's been going down at City Hall, other than what I just talked about with Sarah and Roa, which is the inspiration at the dedication at some of the organizers down there?
Yeah, you know, something funny happened on Facebook this week. It was the 6-year anniversary since my official signing in as a city councilor. And on that first day, I attended the first Black Lives Matter movement protest on the forecourt of City Hall. So there's a lot of people who are tuning into this as though it is a new struggle. This is a continuation of generations of struggle that have been brought forward in a way by a new generation of people who are incredibly caring and deeply compassionate, and are showing a form of what I've been calling radical love and solidarity, even outside of our own communities, with perfect strangers, with people that they have been serving for the last 5 or 6 months, right? And I think that one of the things that's been missing from this is that these are not new faces to the COVID struggle, or to the food security struggle, or to the issues around disability justice and homelessness. These are people who, in fact, from the very onset of COVID, have exhibited their radical love in mutual aid and care for people made vulnerable in this community in ways that have far surpassed the municipal response. Let's be clear, far surpassed the response of any level of government, by organizing within their own communities to be able to provide for people in deep, deep need and peril. And so they watched and witnessed firsthand what economic violence looks like through the ongoing displacement of people who are hyper precarious in their housing. This is something, as a city councilor, I talked about quite a bit. This is something, as a member of parliament, I continue to echo and share and give voice to in the best ways that I can. That when you see the struggle, when you see the pain and the suffering that is the deep poverty within our city, then you can't look away. To see it and be confronted with it in the way that these frontline folks have, the people who have demonstrated in solidarity on the front steps of City Hall in a way of radical and deep love, they're doing that based on their humanity, Anthony. They are exhibiting and exemplifying the type of outrage that all of us as a society should be feeling and exemplifying. And I wrote about this, where there's a displaced anger in poverty, where there's people who, when confronted with poverty in Canada, it unsettles the inconvenient truth about Canada, that we are not, in fact, as exceptional and as progressive and as caring and compassionate as we like to package and promote ourselves to be. That is a form of maple wash propaganda. And when you see the kind of scale of suffering, what we witnessed on York Street and in Ferguson, it actually breaks the frame of Canadian exceptionalism in ways that people clutch their pearls and they get very upset to actually be a part of a society that does not take care of vulnerable people. But the challenge is, rather than be mad at the poverty and the systems that cause it, we're seeing it sometimes exhibited to the people actually with the most suffering in an absurd way. That somehow this is a problem that we can move along, and as long as it's out of sight, out of mind, under a bridge, on the other side of the tracks, or in an escarpment setting where you can't see it, you're not confronted by it, it's okay. But as soon as you see it publicly, then the political veneer, all the hundreds of millions of dollars that we've spent on the branding and packaging of this new Hamilton is all of a sudden gone. And so, you know, that's my perspective. And the type of consistency in the principles and values exhibited by the people who are on the ground, the confrontation with the state's monopoly on violence. And if you're in labor, you know this.
I think
The will of the people, you know what you're up against. And the only way to combat this type of you know, liberal, neoliberal, capitalist ideology of the hyper individual is through collective solidarity. And I think what we are seeing with the folks on the ground is a form of radical solidarity that actually puts themselves in the elements of winter, rain, sleet, police intimidation in ways that even some of the most ardent, you know, and seasoned trade unionists may have never experienced in their lives. And so that's why it's so incredibly important for me tonight to log on with you all, knowing the history and the unique moment that we have in Hamilton. And Anthony, I want to speak to this for a second, because I have had the privilege of seeing organizing across the country. And I know that we get really disillusioned in Hamilton, but in fact, there's something very beautiful in Hamilton that if you're in Hamilton, you might not see it. But we have in Hamilton the deep relationships between labor, between racial justice, social justice, climate justice, in ways that cities could only dream of, that we are actually in these moments, these new civil rights moments, we are on the front tier of organizing in this country, of building the broad-based, people-powered coalitions that are going to be necessary for the types of direct action that will actually move political will, not just in the city, but in the country.
I see that as well, and I see that not only because I notice that oftentimes from a labor perspective, and I am incredibly grateful and thankful when I take a look at my labor council and my executive, especially when I look at some of the decisions that we make as a labor council and how we're often first out of the gate in terms of supporting things. We're the first labor council in this country, I think, that supported defund the police. I'm also, don't get me wrong, I'm also proud that eventually the Ontario Federation of Labor got there about a month later, and even the CLC got there a month later, because down in the States, the AFL-CIO ain't coming anywhere near a defund the police motion. So it was great to see that we eventually got there. But in Hamilton, I think you're right. I think that there are a lot of coalition partners and comrades that have gotten on the same page and realize that that each of us are going to have what we can contribute best, and where we need to make space and need to be allies and need to be accomplices. That's what we need to do as well. That no labor union is going to solve the issue of defund the police. That's not going to be our job. No labor union is going to solve the problem of housing. That's not our job. But where we can be there, that we need to be there. And I know that back from even when you were sitting in a city council position, you know, we always found those intersections of places to work. And I don't know the rest of the country like you do, but I can certainly say that I've heard back from a lot of other places around the country who are thankful when I'm able to pass forward a motion from our labor council to say that we endorsed this, because now it somehow gives them license to be able to do that. And they're amazed and they're shocked by that. I guess the question I want to lead into, and I think this is a question that you uniquely can maybe answer because of your experience at the federal level and the municipal level. There are a lot of people who are just saying, defund the police, forget about the will to do it. You can't do it. Like the way the Police Services Act is set up, the way that you know, municipal governments, collective agreements are set up, all of that stuff. They're just saying, even if we had the will to do it, we couldn't do it. You have an insight into the way that city council works. You have an insight into the way that it works on a federal level, especially with regards to the criminal justice system, not necessarily at the provincial level where the Police Services Act is, but I'm sure you've read up enough about that as well. If there is the will, beyond the fact that you might get a growing consensus that would embarrass people into doing it or whatever it is, do you feel that the mechanisms are right there right now, that if we could just convince the right people to do it, that this could be done?
No, unfortunately, it's an institution. Policing is an institution in this country. And so the challenge is that it can happen over time, but I think it's important for people to know that the municipal government, okay, is separate from the oversight of local police service boards. Local police service boards are an illusion of local oversight in what is essentially a provincial jurisdiction. And what I mean by that is that local police service boards are handpicked appointments of citizens that are highly partisan most of the time. Some city councilors, right? We have 3. And what I've watched, I've experienced it for those who've spent time in police service board meetings as I have, where the mayor, in fact, on my term of council, when we were talking about the racist practice of street checks and carding, tried to move a Melbatos motion, a John Tory light motion at the police service board that was duly passed by the police service board, only to have the chief of police, Glenn DeCare, lean into his lawyer and just tell them no. Because the way that the Police Service Act is written is that the chief is responsible for the operations and the police service board is responsible for the policy. And oh, by the way, it is the legal opinion of the chiefs of police across not just Ontario, but this country, that everything they do is operational, that there is no oversight. In fact, when anybody even dares to question the authority, because reminded, this is a culture that demands compliance at every single aspect. Everything about their culture is about power and control and compliance. Control over is the capital side. And for those who followed me on city council, you may remember that I actually fought against the pilfering of city dollars to go towards that $30 million forensic building that is now in downtown Hamilton. That is absolutely something city council could have redirected and used. And I think about and lament deeply about how many people that money could have helped. That if the will was there.
When I think about the fact that the mayor's trumpeting $5 million over 5 years for affordable housing.
Well, you know what he doesn't talk about when he talks about that, now that we can keep it real?
Yeah.
What he doesn't talk about is the money that we received is from the sale of Hamilton's publicly owned distribution for hydro to private entities, of which he sits on the board for. And by the way, he gets like $40,000 a year extra. He's one of the highest paid mayors in the country. And I can tell you, if we were doing a performance audit, he would fail miserably. The man has been missing in action, not just this term, but for almost the entirety of his political career. There's very few things that you can point to and he could say, I actually accomplished that. And so, the $5 million that came through, $50 million, $5 million a year is absolutely a drop in the bucket. And I also say this to be fair, not to Fred, but to the whole council. The municipal government is absolutely, completely underfunded and ill-prepared and just completely unable to deal with a national housing crisis. The province and the feds have shirked their responsibility to municipal governments simply because they're by and large non-official partisan entities. They can blame bad policy without having the political blowback on 15 years of liberal government. People are homeless in Ontario, not because of Doug Ford. And I know it's inconvenient for people to hear that because there's a lot of people, including folks in the labor union, who happen to really support provincial liberals. But at the end of the day, they are a death by 1,000 cuts. Doug Ford's a butcher, but people are on the streets because of the 15 years of absolutely inadequate investments in social housing, the absolute disgrace that is our social assistance and legislated poverty for Ontario Works and ODSP. And even when they had the opportunity to run a pilot on basic income, they still legislated below the low income cutoff. So don't be fooled by the aesthetics of liberalism. Make no mistakes about it. They are both culpable in responsibilities for the social murder that happens when people freeze to death or worse, succumb to all the different ways in which poverty kills.
So from the answer that you just gave, especially some of the focus at the beginning with regards to that the system is set up to make a fight like this near impossible, if not technically impossible at this point. You've seen.
Well, I need to interject. I don't want to say it's impossible.
Right.
And what I started with was that this is an intergenerational struggle.
Sure.
And what we have gotten to is a place in our liberation where we are able, these folks on the front lines, young people of all backgrounds, have gotten to the other side of fear. They are no longer afraid to confront power and power structures in this city. That is a profound thing. We watched it with Pride. We've seen labor do it from time and time again when they want to flex. And now we're seeing young racialized folks do this, women, trans, queer folks do this work in a fearless way. And it will be part of an ongoing generational struggle. And I also believe that we can get society to a place where we do recognize if police are only responding to 5% of actual violent crime, murders, sexual assaults, aggravated assaults, then the other 95% that is set aside for them, frontline medical care, mental health care, social work, bylaw administrative infractions, traffic infractions. Why do we have to have police at every festival and event at time and a half? Why do we have to have a paid duty system, period? Why have we had to double the police budget over the last 15 years? These are all very valid and rational questions that must be asked and must be explored. I'm just not clear that it can happen in an immediate way based on the institutional and entrenched nature of policing and law enforcement in this country.
So we all know how difficult it can be to fight a war on multiple fronts as opposed to one front. But ultimately, that's what has to be done. And there's going to have to be, like we spoke about, like I was speaking about with some of the previous people who've jumped on, the coalitions need to keep building. We've talked about it for years, and there have been coalitions for years. But it used to be that in this city, in this province, that if all of organized labor stood up for something, there was a chance you could actually get it done because we had the union density at a certain time in history where you could say, yeah, organized labor is all behind this, we can do this. That doesn't happen anymore. We simply don't have the union density. We don't have the forward thrust behind labor as a whole. Now, does that mean that it's become completely neutered? No, because obviously we have the ability to join with other people. But this is something where we've had people on tonight from talking about the LGBTQ2SI community earlier. We had people coming on from Acorn to talk about housing. These are all the groups that need to come together. And this is, like you said, this is one of these clutch moments where I think, and you're right, it's the generational aspect is important. And I'm coming from even a far older generation than you at this point, and I'm looking back on it. And I came to my activism later in life. So in some ways, I feel like I'm coming to it anew, and maybe I'm experiencing some stuff that people who were maybe some people who were active in it when they were younger already experienced. But it does seem like this is different. You know, a lot of people from my home union, OSSTF, will talk about the days of action, you know, back in the late 1990s, and that was great. But it was a campaign. It needs to be a movement. It needs to be bigger than a campaign. This can't just be about defund the police. It can't just be about housing. It can't just be about living wage. It can't just be about basic income or whatever it is. It has to be about everything together. Are you seeing, from your perspective, the will for that to happen across the province and around the country in enough places at this point? Or is it just that we have to maybe wait? Like you said, Hamilton is maybe the harbinger of fear for some of the neoliberal governments that are out there. So, you know, is this something that you see growing in different pockets around the country?
Oh, I absolutely do. And this is where in the new Politics 3.0, We don't have to rely on mainstream media. The fact that you are convening community online right here through YouTube, transmitted out in perpetuity to the world, is a marker and a moment that cannot be forgotten nor erased. And it has been true in the past where there have been campaigns that just haven't been able to sustain the kind of momentum and awareness. But that has completely shifted. I was, maybe 300 interviews during the Black Lives Matter movement moment that was happening over the course of the spring, syndicated across the country. There was, I was tuning into Whitehorse, Yukon, St. John's, Newfoundland. There were complete awakenings of communities on this new civil rights. And it is larger in its scale than the civil rights of the 60s. The people who are on the footsteps of City Hall are as historic as Black Panthers, as Rosa Parks, as the March on Washington, and they are doing it in ways in which we won't be able to fully appreciate in the present. But as an amateur historian, I am observing this history that's unfolding. There is solidarity with Indigenous struggles. We're seeing it with the solidarity back and forth between here and 1492, the solidarity that happened around all the things in which organized power, dead power is what I will call it, all the things in which dead power has bemoaned about the solidarity, because this is what they can't understand. This is what dead power refuses to acknowledge. They can't for the life of them figure out why people would care about other people, about other issues that don't directly impact them. There is no understanding of solidarity within the powerful elite outside of capitalism. And so unless there's a monetary value, i.e. Fred privatizing the distribution of hydro, pushing for it, jumping on the board and getting $40,000 a year for it, to come back with a $5 million a year, mea culpa. He can't comprehend how people would put themselves out in the snow in solidarity with people living in tents, because that's just not part of his value system. He doesn't get it. But young people across this country do. If you look at the direct actions in BC against the government out west, if you look at, what's happening on the East Coast with the, from organizing to the Mi'kmaq territories, if you look at what's happening all across Ontario, this is a moment, right? And I believe that that COVID is a shock variable within society that will forever change the trajectory. And this is a moment that if we don't capture, the Interparliamentary Report on Climate Change has already told us there's 8 years left. If we don't have a radical shift in extractivism, in extractionary capitalism, in the state monopoly on violence for the benefit only and solely of corporate interest, because that's what it's about. Let's just call it what it is. It's not about hygiene. It's not about public health when they dismantle encampments. It is all about aesthetics. And liberalism is the number one driver of the politics of aesthetics in this country. At least with conservatism, they just tell you straight up, what their ideology is. Yeah. But with liberalism and with the local powers that be, they are so in a death grip with the fallacy of this renaissance in a city that has left thousands of people out and behind. That while we have record numbers of building permits dotting the sky, building shitty condos, we simultaneously have record numbers of people who cannot afford a roof over their head or food for their belly.
I got one or two more questions for you, if you don't mind. And before I do that, I want to make sure that people understand that one of the reasons we're doing this call tonight is to get you to donate. So please go to info@defundhps.com. You can e-transfer funds to them if you wish, or just email them and ask them what they need. We heard Sarah on previously letting us know that any warm weather gear would be appreciated. Sleeping bags, blankets, heaters, glove and feet warmer and sock warmers, anything, because being out, you can imagine if you've ever been on a picket line before, if we got some labor people listening, if you've ever been on a picket line before, you've been out there for one night and you think, oh, that chills you to the bone for the next couple of days. We have people who've been out there for close to 2 weeks now.
Shout out to the cops who might be tuning into this as well through the electronic surveillance. I know that Hamilton has, a unit. I think if anything for the police that are watching, at least respect their moxie. And if you can donate, I would ask you to donate as well, because hey, it's probably paying your overtime at this moment.
Well, like
I'm not even joking, bro.
I know.
That's for real.
I was saying earlier, I was down there the first night. I was down there late. It was almost midnight by the time I got down there on the first night. And there was less than 25 people out front at that point, and there was 7 cruisers and 3 vans out back. Like,
I can recall going to a event organized by the Young Students of McMaster, the Womanists, and others at Victoria Park. This is probably 4 years ago. Again, these people, like, this isn't new for folks. They've been at this for a long time.
Yeah.
And I remember showing up as a city councilor then to Victoria Park and having to advise them to organize within the baseball diamond, because there was reports of people coming to disrupt it. And, there was all types of insinuations of infiltration, but the police presence there, they had offsite at Fortino's, mounted police, riot police, staff sergeants galore. For every 4 cops, by the way, there needs to be like a supervisor, and then, then you get into your sergeants, and everybody's in there in a time and a half. And again, this is how budgets run amok. If we eliminated paid duty, we would have enough within our budget to service the existing violent crimes and organized crime in this city, right? But that stuff hasn't gone away. By doubling our police budget, we have not reduced the amount of drug trade, drug trafficking, illegal casinos, and organized crime in the city. They never talk about it. They never talk about the Hells Angels. They never talk about the mob. They never talk about any of that stuff. That just coexists in an underworld that's completely unpoliced. So all the resources that go in to, a direct action, a peaceful protest on City Hall, is money that's not going in to real crime, and it doesn't require that kind of response.
They're currently they've already started budget committee meetings, GIC meetings at City Council for next year's budget. I know every year that we have gone forward as a Labor Council to ask for something, it's always about the dreaded tax base. And I always get a question from a councillor here or there saying, well, if I came to you and said I had to raise your taxes to do this, would you say that you were okay with it? And I'm always the guy who says, hell yeah, go ahead, raise my taxes, but just spend it wisely. That's what I want. I want you to spend it wisely.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the $500,000 they spent on an Amazon bid that ended up in us getting I don't even know what kind of wages are going to be at that facility. Shout out to anybody who unionizes and organizes that shop. Think about the money that these guys, without even a blink, were talking about for the Commonwealth Games.
Yeah.
So, again, this begs the question. I can't believe what you say when I see what you do. And the best way to take a look is to look at the budgets. And I've been a part of those discussions. They're not easy discussions to have. And again, look, I'm not here as an apologist for council, but council is absolutely not the place. This is why I ran federally, because it is not the place that can solve a national housing crisis, right, or an opioid epidemic, or catastrophic climate change in real and meaningful ways. And so I say that from a place of yes, we need to apply pressure. And yes, we need to look at where the priorities are. And yes, we need to counter the rhetoric that comes out and the obvious, cultural incompetence and systemic racism that is displayed in perpetuity there, definitely. And we also need to look at the power structures provincially and federally to ensure that if Philomena Tassi or Donna Skelly or Bob Bertina or any of us, myself included, fall short of our fiduciary responsibilities to our communities, that we're called out on it and we're organized against in direct ways.
The last question I'm going to ask you is a question that I've asked most people on the call tonight. And I'm trying to give people the ammunition, so to speak, to talk to people and say, people who aren't convinced when they hear defund and abolish. And oftentimes we hear that one sentence or that one way that the argument is phrased, and we can use that, whether it's with family, whether it's with friends, whether we're trying to convince somebody. I'm curious as to, obviously you've run into many people probably at this point who have blanched at the fact that, we're talking about defund, abolish. What are some of the most, let's just say, elementary ways right now that you try and convince them? Because we obviously can't have 2-hour conversations with everybody, but the most elementary ways that you've been trying to convince people about saying that it's time that we need to take a look at this, and maybe something that people could take away with them as they're doing their activism and trying to change people's minds.
Yeah, that's an important question. The first thing I would want to know is, like, what are you most afraid of? And the actual response is one of fear. They're afraid of violent crimes. They're afraid of, sexual assaults, murders, aggravated assaults, and that requires a very direct response. And I would suggest to them, like, okay, well, would you agree then that we should allocate budgets to policing to respond specifically to those community needs? Think about that. Think about, our police best situated to deal with mental health, social service, addictions, homelessness? And the average regular person would be like, no, it's not what they should be doing. Okay, well, let's say that their response was only 10% for violent crimes and sexual assaults, which, by the way, even with $172 million, they don't adequately respond to. And that's just the facts, that the social sciences are clear that even within the bloated budgets of our police services, they have an absolute horrible and atrocious record for investigating sexual assaults. How do we know that? We have a whole inquiry around missing and murdered Indigenous women. These whole systems and institutions that are supposed to be set up to protect us are failing at the highest levels. And yet, 15 years ago in Hamilton, the budget was $100 million. That's a lot of money. Hamilton was a tough town 15 years ago. Now, maybe not so much. But now their budget's $175 million. Total spending and investments in social services like $150 million. So we spend more on policing than all other social services combined. That is not working, and that is not working for us. And we can change that. That can be changed. So to think about what their fears are, murders, sexual assaults, then just ask them, would you then agree that we should fund policing proportionate to the amount of calls and time that they spend on that? We don't need cops directing traffic when the street's torn up. We don't need cops at our festivals and our fairs. We don't need cops at our sporting events. That is just an absolute overthrow by the police associations. And it's on the tax dollar. Like, most of the funding that comes through our Cities Enrichment Fund, when you look at the events and actually find out how much they're spending, an obscene amount is going to paid duty policing. Why? And then further to that, why is everybody so uncomfortable when we talk about cuts to healthcare? Nobody even blinks when we talk about, cuts to education. Nobody blinks. They can cut school programs for kids, breakfast programs for kids. They don't blink. Look, we're talking about defunding every single day at council, every single day at the province, and every single day federally. The only difference is we're defunding the social services and the basic necessities of life while continuing to overinvest in policing and imperial wars in the military. And it's just like, well, what Canada do you want to live in? Because you can't have it both ways. You can't pretend to be aspirational, progressive, and caring, compassionate, and continue to see and be, and acknowledge the brutality that is happening. Those are incompatible positions for you to take.
Matt, thanks so much for your time on a Friday night. I know it's not often you get to spend a bunch of time at home, but I imagine you've been working from home more over the past few months than you have ever in the past. So I do appreciate it, and I do agree with you that this is. I think in Hamilton we've got a very special situation here with regards to the coalitions and the allyship and the work that some people are doing together. And I'm grateful that you're a part of it and that you've been a part of it for the past many years. And it's been great to work with you on that stuff. And like I say, I don't know whether it's going to take a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but I know as long as you and I are around, and far beyond us, as long as some of those young people who are standing out front of City Hall are around, that we are definitely in good shape. And I think any inspiration that some of our young kids in schools are taking from the activism that is happening right now in front of City Hall. To think that in 2 or 3 years when you graduate high school, you know, that is the level of engagement that you can have.
Well, make no mistakes about it. There are kids that are out there that are still in high school and
Oh.
leading as young people and students. And that's what, you know, that is, look, at every step along the way for every social change that has happened throughout modern Western civilization, it has been led by students and young people.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's us who have to get out of our comfort or out of our orthodoxy and be led by it.
What's funny, some of the veterans, when I say veterans, some of the old guard labor people, when they cringe maybe at some of the tactics that are used, and you think to yourself, yeah, maybe you cringe at the tactics that are used, but guess what? They're not your tactics. It's not your generation anymore. Tactics have to change, and a lot has to change. So maybe you just have to get comfortable with the fact and make space for not only people, but for the new tactics as well, and understand that there is going to be a new politic that happens. I want to remind people a final time: donate by e-transfer to info@defundhps.com. If it's cash, that's great. If it's supplies, that's fantastic. Pledge your volunteer time at hdlc.ca/fundraiser. If you can go down there for an hour, for 2 hours, for 5 hours, for 10 hours over the next week, and just to hang out with them, have conversations with them, provide a new face on site. When sometimes it's cold overnight, having a couple new people there makes all the difference. And I can say that myself from being on lines late at night in the cold as well. So I want to thank everybody for jumping on the call today. I want to thank you, Matt, for signing us off. You picked a good time. We'll have the credits rolling after this, but there's still a lot of story to be told. Any kind of last message that you want people to take away from this, especially if there are people from labor who are watching right now, because I know a lot of the contacts that I have on Facebook and Labor Council has out there are from labor. I know that you and I have had some conversations about labor before, so any messaging that you want to shout out to them?
100%. Like, let's take note here. People think that we're going to hit New Year's and turn the page, and that is not going to happen. I share with you that it could be the case that we're actually going to be in worse times. And the only way that we're going to be able to confront this is by allowing folks to take the lead like they are in direct action and have collective solidarity, radical love for people that go beyond our locals, our unions, our affiliates, and into the broader community to organize as whole people and whole workers, recognizing our humanity, recognizing what solidarity is like. You have an opportunity to be a part of the new civil rights. It's a calling. This is not an invitation. This is your calling. You have a responsibility to future generations to provide this type of support in these moments.
This is, for anybody who's a labor historian, this is our RAND formula. These are the big wins that we celebrate over history that happened within the labor movement. That's what's happening now. And it's not just the labor movement, but labor needs to be a part of it. Labor definitely needs to be part of it. So I encourage people to get out there and support and be allies and be accomplices and learn what they can do in order to be there. Because like I said, we got a hell of a mountain to climb, a hell of a lot of mountains to climb. Donate. Thanks very much to a member of our HDLC executive, Rosa, for helping up behind the scenes on the call. I want to thank our first Vice President, Jody Eatington, for helping to line up some of our guests tonight. This came together very, very quickly. I decided that this might be a good idea a couple of days ago because I was infuriated the last time I walked down there and learned about the arrests and what happened. And we don't have to relive that right now, but suffice to say, there is room for all of us to step up. And I'm glad that everybody has joined us tonight. Thank you very much. Donate. We will be back in the future. Have a great night and a great weekend, Matt, and hope to talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone. We're going to end the call here. And like I said, donate.